Прийшли окупанти до нас в Україну, форма новенька, воєнні машини та трохи поплавився їх інвентар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Російські танкісти сховались з кущі, щоб лаптем посьорбати довбані щі, та трохи у чах перегрівся навар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Приперли зі сходу до нас барани для восстановлення
великої страни.
Найкращий пастух баранячих отар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Їх доводи всяке озброєння різне, потужні ракети, машини залізні, у нас на всі доводи є коментар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Вони захопити хотіли нас зразу, а ми зачаїли на орків образу з російських бандитів, робить примар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Російська поліція справи заводить, там вбивцю рашистів ніяк не знаходить, хто винен, що в нашому полі глухар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Веде пропаганду кремлівський урод, слова пропаганди ковтає народ, тепер нове слово знає цар.
Байрактар.
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 Yes.
The Leaf Spring Army sends its regards.
Русский военный корабль. Предлагаю сложить оружие и сдаться. Русский военный корабль, иди нахуй.
Hello, everyone. I'm the Enforcer, and I'm accompanied by Enforcer Matt.
And good evening, folks. It's Enforcer Matt, and welcome back to day 486 of the news. And it's good to see you all once again. And once again, the news coming out of Russia is absolutely mind-boggling.
And it is absolutely insane. We're going to be covering the past 24 hours of the coup in Russia, or the armed rebellion more so in Russia, that has just ended a few hours ago, and we'll also be covering some of the war news as well. As you can tell, today's color on the map is yellow, and we have a very small amount of actual frontline news regarding the war in Ukraine. However, we have made a separate map, there's a link in the description below for it, for everything that happened in the coup. And that is what we're going to be covering for the first part of the night, is as much as we can about the coup. And so with that, we're going to be starting off up at the very top, because I actually went through a massive amount of effort on this map tonight to make sure that every single one of these dots that you see here on the left side of the screen is actually sequenced to their order that happened over the course of time. So this would have been about an hour after our live stream ended last night. That would be the first marker here, and then the last one would be around 3 or 4 o'clock Eastern time, and that was the last bit of news that we saw from the coup. And so moving on into our first bit of news, last night when we left the stream, we saw that the Wagner convoy was nearing Voronezh, and we have a small clip of that right here. We can see the convoy moving on down the road. Of course, it's the typical Wagner convoy that we've seen multiple times at this point. And they were making their way on towards Voronezh. At this moment, while this video was being made, Russian police and security forces were, of course, much like in Rostov-on-Don, preparing to meet the Wagner forces and stop them at Voronezh and ensure that they would not move any further than Voronezh town. You see the rest of the convoy rolling on by right here. And that's the end of that clip. After we saw that occur on TV, we heard that the Rostov-on-Don city had not just been rumored to fall under control of the Wagner, we now saw that it had come under complete control of the Wagner, and now the Wagner, instead of the Russian Ministry of Defense, was the one setting up the roadblocks outside of Rostov-on-Don. We can see pictures right here of the exit in Escalation heading to Rostov being blocked off by Wagner forces and a temporary blockade being made. We can see that there was very little traffic going into Rostov that morning, but nonetheless, the Wagner had come under complete control of Rostov-on-Don and was now controlling the entrances and exits to the city. After that news, we saw a little bit just actually about 10 minutes after the Rostov-on-Don city came under complete control from the Wagner and we were now seeing blockades being made, Putin finally came out and made that address. In case of y'all are wondering, why did we not address that on stream last night? Because according to this time frame here, it would seem that it only happened about an hour after our stream went off air. This actually aired at around 3 a.m. in the morning, our time, and our stream ended around 1:30. And so it was almost an entire hour and a half to 2 hours after our stream ended. Putin finally gave the speech that was scheduled to happen about an hour before our stream ended. So nearly 3 hours after the scheduled speech was supposed to occur, it finally happened. And so we're going to play the entire speech because it is fairly interesting, and there is a lot we can gather from the speech that Putin gave in the middle of really in the middle of the morning in Russia, in the middle of the night for us, yesterday. And so here's...
Just to be straight, this is the angry Putin. This isn't the sad Putin.
This is not the sad Putin. This is the infuriated Putin. And of course, as many of y'all can tell, his normal facial expression is not there. But anyways, getting on into it. I appeal to the citizens of Russia, to the personnel of the armed forces, law enforcement agencies and special services, to the fighters and commanders who are now fighting on their battle positions, repelling the enemy's attacks. They are doing this heroically, knowing I spoke again tonight with commanders of all directions. I appeal also to those who were deceived or threatened into a criminal venture, pushed onto the path of a serious crime, an armed rebellion. Russia today is fighting the hardest battle for its future, reflecting the aggression of neo-Nazis and their masters. Against us is effectively the entire military, economic, informational machine of the West. We are fighting for the life and safety of our people. for our sovereignty and independence, for the right to be and remain Russia, a state with a 1,000-year history. This battle, when the fate of our people is decided, requires the unification of all forces. Unity, consolidation, and responsibility, when everything that weakens us must be, and let me go back and grab that line for us real quick, must be cast aside. Any disagreements that our external enemies can and do use to undermine us from within, and therefore actions that split our unity are, in essence, defection from your own people. And to pause this speech here for a moment, just to make a quick note of where the speech is going, we can already see that he has set up in this speech the importance of the war that they're fighting inside of Ukraine for the public's mind. You've got to remember that this speech is being made not just to try and turn the Wagner against Prighozin, but this is also in an attempt to turn the Russian public against Prighozin as his convoy drives through the very areas the people on TV are watching in. So right now he's trying to lay out the importance of the war, and now he's going to start spinning the story that Prighozin and the Wagner unit are actually traitors to the Russian people. So here comes that part. From combat comrades who are fighting now on the front, this is a blow in the back to our country and our people. Exactly such a blow was struck against Russia in 1917, when the country was fighting the First World War. But victory was stolen from her. Intrigues, squabbles, political games behind the back of the army and the people turned into the greatest upheaval. The destruction of the army and the disintegration of the state. The loss of vast territories. In the end, the tragedy of the Civil War. Russians were killing Russians, brothers against brothers, and the selfish benefit was derived by various political adventures and foreign forces that were dividing the country, tearing it apart. We will not let this happen again. We will protect both our people and our statehood from any threats, including from internal treason. And now, y'all can see right here that Putin has labeled Prighozin and the Wagner unit, as of that point in the speech, the midway point, as traitors and committing treason against the Russian nation. Meaning now, and of course this is going off of what Prighozin said the other day, now Putin is clearly making a statement against the Prighozin and the Wagner, and he's now standing in their way. And of course there is going to be some fallout from that here in a minute. And what we are facing is precisely betrayal. Inordinate ambitions and personal interests led to betrayal. To betraying their country, their people, and the cause for which, side by side with other units and subdivisions, fighters and commanders of the Wagner group fought and died. Heroes who liberated Soledar and Bakhmut, cities and villages of Donbass, who fought and gave their lives for Novorossiya, which is the concept of a Russian world, for the unity of the Russian world. Their name and glory were also betrayed by those who are trying to organize a rebellion, pushing the country towards anarchy and fratricide, to defeat in the end and to capitulation. I repeat, any internal turmoil is a deadly threat to our statehood, for us, as a nation. This is a blow to Russia, to our people, and our actions to protect the motherland from such a threat will be harsh. Everyone who deliberately embarked on the path of treason, who prepared an armed rebellion, who chose the path of blackmail and terrorist methods, will suffer unspeakable punishment. They will answer both to the law and to our people. The armed forces and other state bodies have received the necessary orders. Additional anti-terrorist measures are now being introduced in Moscow, in the Moscow region, and in a number of other regions. Decisive actions will also be taken to stabilize the situation in Rostov-on-Don. It remains difficult. The work of civil and military administration bodies is essentially blocked. As the President of Russia and the Supreme Commander-in-Chief, as a citizen of Russia, I will do everything to defend the country, to protect the constitutional order, life, and safety, freedom of citizens. Those who organized and prepared the military rebellion, those who took up arms against their comrades, have betrayed Russia and will answer for it. And those who are being tried to be drawn into this crime, I urge not to make a fatal and tragic, irreparable mistake. To make the only right choice, to stop participating in criminal activities. I believe that we will save and defend what is dear and sacred to us. And together with our motherland, we will overcome any trials and become even stronger. As Putin's speech rounded
I like
out,
how Putin doesn't even bother to address any of the arguments that Wagner's making for attempting the coup. He just moves on to playing the victim, saying that they've been attacked and it's treason, and doesn't once mention any reason for it.
And you're absolutely right. He doesn't even address any of the Wagner concerns or anything similar. He clearly went out of his way to immediately call them traitors for pointing out the corruption in the Russian government, which lets y'all know that corruption stems from Putin because he's not wanting that to be called out, and he's immediately going to try and crush anyone who stands in the way of all of the corruption that exists below him. Interestingly enough, while he appeared incredibly angry and very hostile in this video, it appears to have not been that long lasted. About 20 or 30 minutes after that video was made, that speech was addressed to the public, Putin's Ilyushin 96, which is the Russian equivalent of Air Force One, took off and was noted on flight radar to be flying deeper into Russia, further east. And we can see that right here. We can see the plane took off from Moscow on the flight radar and began to fly into what appears to be a flight path heading to Kazakhstan. And at the moment, everyone thought that Putin was going to flee the Russian Federation. It appeared so. The speech had ended, and now his plane was in the air immediately. And it only went in the air after he finished the speech, and it went live. And so a lot of people started to think that he was leaving Russia. And that plane would continue to fly, and it would then turn and make its way to Ufa. It almost appeared that it was going to go into Kazakhstan based off of his flight plan. It then banked left, flew to Ufa, landed, stayed there for 40 minutes, which we're assuming was to refuel, and then it turned around and it flew back to Moscow. And we don't really know why the plane went to Ufa, and there's been many rumors about why this was so. Some people are saying that it may have flown to Ufa because that was going to be where Putin hid out while this was all going on. He was not going to stay in Moscow. He was going to be in Ufa further east, so that way if anything happened, they could pick him up in Ufa and then fly him on into Kazakhstan or wherever he needed to go, or Belarus for that matter. And that's what people were thinking. But the jet flying back, we don't really know what the exact story was behind Putin's Ilyushin 76 and why it flew out of Moscow right after the speech and then landed in Ufa for an incredibly short amount of time and then flew right back immediately. While all of that was going on with the jet, the Wagner convoy was continuing to drive on even further north, and the first videos were coming out that the convoy had made it into the city of Voronezh itself and was seen passing through the town on the M4 highway. When you see the Wagner convoy right out there. They are the slower moving vehicles like that Scooby-Doo van. And when you see these guys out here, they appear to be dog drunk in broad daylight because they're right outside of a bar, watching these Wagner columns pass by. Wagner got pretty busy in Voronezh as well. It appears that Rostov-on-Don and Voronezh were going to be their planned staging points for what may have become a civil war at that point. And we saw that as Wagner forces entered the city and then passed through, another force turned off of the M4 highway and proceeded to the western side of the city, where they then began to secure oil depots, most likely to try and fuel their forces if there was to be a prolonged armed conflict. We can see Wagner forces here, moving outside of the oil refineries and oil silos and securing a perimeter. And up until this point, many of y'all, and I would have to agree with y'all, many of y'all would think, well, nothing has really happened. There's no bloodshed. These people are just going on a field trip with the Frizz on the Magic School Bus, pretty much, to Moscow. Nothing is happening, really, of any substance or note. And this is where things start to change at Voronezh. The Russian government appears to have been incredibly shaken by the Wagner unit finally reaching Voronezh, because things started to escalate incredibly quickly. And nobody has really brought this up anywhere else that I've seen so far. But we have loads of videos showing that things started to heat up very fast and very quickly as far as the Wagner unit went. And so we can also see that at the same time, we'll be getting back to how that's heating up here in a minute. We can see at the same time as the Wagner was driving forward, apparently the Russian government had their mind still on the propaganda side of things and began to remove Wagner propaganda and recruiting banners outside of the city of Moscow, so that way no one would just want to go join the Wagner in the middle of the ongoing rebellion. We can see this guy here with a crowbar, and he's trying to take down the Wagner recruiting sign. Because as many of y'all all know, if things are stupid in Russia, they can only get stupider. And so in the middle of this whole armed rebellion ordeal, let's go and send some guys out to start taking down the recruitment posters, because that is, of course, the most pressing thing going on right now. After that was done in Moscow, because of course all these videos are being put out in sequence, so they're all coming one after the other as the news was coming out, the Wagner Telegram made a very interesting statement while the majority of the Wagner convoy was starting to move past Voronezh and towards the town of Yelets here further north. They said Pipa, which is the nickname for Putin, made the wrong choice after that speech was made. This was done about 30 minutes after Putin gave that address, and his plane was still airborne at this point, flying to Ufa when this came out on Telegram. But this is from the official Wagner Telegram, and it says, Pipa made the wrong choice, period. That's all it said. And this was then followed by a statement, and we don't have an audio recording for this one, but this was followed by a statement from Prighozin, where he said Russia will also be getting a new president as well now, meaning that not only is he going to be going for Shoigu, Gerasimov, and all of the guys at the top of the Ministry of Defense, he's now also going to be planning on dethroning Putin as well and installing a brand new government. Citizens then spotted the convoy a little bit further up the highway, this time near the town of Vinis, which is just about 10 miles north of Voronezh, and we saw them moving up the highway once more. We can see the myriad of vehicles that they pulled right out of the front lines from Ukraine that began to make their way on towards Moscow. We can see multiple Scooby-Doo vans, several Kamazes, some buses, and most importantly, this is the thing that is going to come important here in a minute, a Panzer S-1 surface-to-air missile defense system. Now, we've seen these things a good amount in the war. I know that this may not be that shocking of a system, but what was shocking to us is that the Russian Ministry of Defense, at some point, had actually provided the Wagner with one of the most advanced frontline anti-air systems that the Russians are able to field, at least short-range anti-air missile systems. And this is going to become very important later because, from what we can tell, most of the losses that anyone took in this entire rebellion was in the air. And that was by the Russian Ministry of Defense having multiple helicopters and aircraft shot down. But we'll be getting to that later. Just keep in mind, the Wagner has anti-air, very competent anti-air. We now see them passing by the rest of the convoy, and of course we can see, as usual, the Wagner is not that well equipped. It's a hodgepodge of equipment like we've been seeing them use in Ukraine.
Yeah, it seems like their most prolific equipment is cargo vans at this point.
Yeah, I mean, like, it's just anything they could get their hands on, really.
Very little actual equipment to fight with.
Yeah, and we can see some of their equipment that they actually can fight with, but it's very few and far in number. We've seen about 20 civilian vehicles at this point that they're using, and we've only seen 2 BMP-2s for this entire contingent of forces. So fairly interesting to see. We can see more Scooby-Doo vans, more pickup trucks, your old 4320 mixed in there. And this also gives us a really good idea that a lot of Russian units, including the Wagner that have been fighting in Ukraine, have been spent of practically every single usable vehicle that they had at the beginning of the war. They've had to scrounge together anything they can at this point to have a unit. We can see that the Wagner may have also been able to acquire some fuel trucks which is why this convoy may be stopped on this road. They may be refueling their fuel trucks. Well, they may be refueling the trucks with the fuel trucks. This also shows that they have a little bit of preparation in mind, considering that they planned refueling trips along the way. We can see these guys continuing to drive by. And we can see a BRDM-2 there, one of the few actual fighting vehicles we've seen, and it's one of the lighter ones. And we're finally seeing one of the first main battle tanks. It appears to be a T-72B3 on this trailer. And then we can see another T-72B3 on that trailer. We can see them also being accompanied by a large amount of 18-wheelers, most likely carrying supplies for the unit. After that video clip was seen, and we were clearly seeing that the Wagner is continuing to move on forward, Wagner was also beginning to prepare in Rostov-on-Don for a supposed unit of National Guard troops, the Rosguardia, that was going to arrive in the town of Rostov-on-Don and begin to directly fight against the Wagner that had now taken complete control of the town. And we can see Wagner soldiers preparing for that in the streets right here. We can see them bringing up some AT weapons, moving around and preparing some sort of positions. And as we can see, the Wagner was ready to face down and fight the Russian military wherever they may come, wherever they may be, to secure this rebellion and coup. And we can see them setting up on the road right here. When you see them continuing to set up, and later on, we didn't show this video clip because there's so many of them, an order was actually given for the citizens to leave the center of the city because they thought a serious firefight was about to begin with Rosguardia troops. That firefight would never happen. Whatever happened, the Rosguardia just never showed up. There was a force that was on the way to Rostov-on-Don at that moment. We don't know if it disintegrated or if they refused their orders or what. We don't really know. But they never ended up making it to the town of Rostov-on-Don, and the Wagner's preparations ended up being in vain for that reason. After that, we then saw one of the first serious instances of fighting in between the Russians and the Wagner unit, as the M4 was then bombed by the Russian Air Force. This little picture here shows a faint smoke cloud in the distance. This camera is actually somewhere in the area of Voronezh and facing northwards towards the M4 highway, and this pillar of smoke is coming off of that highway and is after the Russians apparently airstriked the column and attempted to destroy some of the Wagner forces. And that was one of the first armed conflicts or armed exchanges that we saw in between the Wagner and the MOD at this point in the conflict. Moving on from that, we also heard the sounds of firefighting further up the road and towards the halfway point in between Yelets and Voronezh. And here's a audio recording of that firefight.
Молодец. Что война началась. Пиздец. Ох, ебать. А вон, гляди, ага, видишь, вон. Ракеты, наверное, сбивают. Да.
We hear some gunfire in the distance. We now hear some pretty loud explosions occurring near the cameraman. We now hear the
Wow, it's
firefights
really erupting.
Yeah, it's really taking off here.
This guy really doesn't know where he's going.
Yeah, this guy is just running randomly as the firefight continues.
ракеты.
We hear the firefight continuing out there.
Бля, ясно. Бля.
And we hear the firefight still occurring as this cameraman now starts to run as fast as he can away from the firefight.
Ирка!
That's the end of that clip, but as y'all could see, an actual firefight began to occur in between Wagner and MOD forces at that point in the highway. That would not stop the Wagner. Apparently, the Wagner wiped out whatever security forces they were going up against and continued even further up the highway after that firefight. In the meantime, a Russian helicopter was shot down. And here's the clip. There is one of the first confirmed pictures that we got from the entire coup that the Wagner unit had actually shot down a Russian helicopter. From what we can tell, this is an Mi-8 or an Mi-17 helicopter that was near the direction of the M4 highway and was possibly even heading southbound along the length of the highway towards the town of Voronezh. It is even supposed by some people that this was one of the first helicopters that was going to be sent to Voronezh to destroy the oil depots that Wagner was just seen earlier capturing around an hour and a half ago. But this is one of the first real videos, one of the first real pictures that we had seen where the Wagner had ended up shooting down a Russian helicopter. There were 2 Russian pilots inside of this helicopter, and neither of them would survive the subsequent crash of the helicopter after it was shot down by the Wagner. We're now going to be moving on from that little bit of news, and on into our next one where we saw that things had really heated up as a unknown aircraft, we're assuming that this was a Russian fighter jet over the city of Voronezh, was then most likely shot down by a Pantsir S-1 that had been set up in the area of Voronezh, and this aircraft appears to have possibly been heading to Voronezh to blow up the oil depots that the Wagner had captured. That aircraft would be shot down, and both pilots, from what we understand, would be lost. We hear the sound of the jet engines of that aircraft. And we can now see the little plume of smoke that's coming from it as it begins to spiral out of the sky and to the ground. And of course...
Bliet, what a shame.
Bliet, what an unfortunate tragedy. And both of those pilots would end up, from what we were told, not surviving that crash. We're now going to be moving on from that little bit of news. And of course, y'all can see that things at this moment, and this was about an hour and a half, around 2 hours after the Wagner, or the Wagner as people are now telling me it's pronounced, had captured Voronezh. We could see that now, verified, 1 helicopter and 1 airplane had been shot down. And we probably saw one of the most serious incidents as an Antonov 26 was then shot down near the town of Lipetsk, which a small Wagner contingent had gone to secure. Now, to explain really quickly what an Antonov 26 is, because many people are probably not familiar with this aircraft, it is a light transport aircraft that has been used by multiple countries, including the Russian Air Force. You can see one right here. It's very similar to an Antonov 22, which the Ukrainians have been using a small amount during the war. This aircraft, if we go down to the specifications, and let me go down to the specifications real quick so that way we can find it. Aircraft on display, specifications. This aircraft has the ability to carry 40 people on it. We do not know if this aircraft was carrying anyone on it rather than the pilot, the co-pilot, and most likely a navigator, which would be a crew of 3. Actually, there is a crew of 5 on this aircraft at any given moment. There are 2 pilots, a radio operator, a flight engineer, and a navigator. There are 5 crew members that are always going to be on board of an Antonov 26. We do not know how many additional passengers, if there were any, that were on board this Antonov 26. This Antonov 26 was spotted by Wagner forces flying southbound once again towards the city of Voronezh over the direction of Lipetsk, and the order was given, most likely from Prighozin himself, for a Pantsir S-1 to target the Antonov 26 and shoot it down. Here is the video after the impact of the missile ruptured the cabin of the Antonov 26 and it began its death spiral to the ground. We can see that Antonov 26 up there breaking up in air, as one entire wing is engulfed in flames. 5 Russian aviators were killed in this Antonov 26. Who knows how many passengers were also on board?
Seems like Wagner's pretty good at taking down planes, kind of like Ukraine.
Yeah, they are pretty damn good at it. I'm not going to lie. They are really good at this stuff. And when you see the Antonov 26 continuing to break up, it appears that the rear part of the fuselage near the vertical stabilizer has completely sheared off at this point as the Antonov 26 continues to spiral down to the ground. We now see the Antonov 26 just feet from the ground and finally impacting with it. And we can now hear the thud of the aircraft now hitting. At this point, from what we know, at least 7 Russian aviators have been killed by the Wagner at this point of the coup within the course of the past hour alone. So from this Antonov 26 to an hour before that, 7 Russian aviators at a minimum have been killed. And this is, of course, showing, because some people have been saying, and it's been circling around, that this was all some kind of a fanciful show. That's why no one ended up dying in this whole ordeal, is because it really wasn't meant to really kill anyone. It was just meant to make it look like Russia was falling apart to the outside world. But that's not the case. This is, there has been at least 7 Russian aviators at this point, as we're covering the coup, that have been killed so far because of it. And we don't know how many others have been unconfirmed that we don't have picture or video evidence for. We did hear that there were around 3 helicopters shot down around Rostov-on-Don at the very beginning of the coup. We've never gotten confirmation of those. Those could also be additional casualties that were because of this rebellion itself. And so moving on from that Antonov 26, and I also saw someone say that, asked me, did you see someone eject? There is no way for anyone to eject from this Antonov 26 due to the kind of spin it was in, and also there are no ejection seats in an Antonov 26. So the chances of anyone being able to get out of the aircraft was slim to none, and we also didn't see any parachutes either in the entire clip. So everyone on board ended up being killed in that crash. Moving on from that bit of news, we then saw that while blood was being shed in the skies over Voronezh, citizens started to argue over the Wagner being in Rostov-on-Don. This would actually end up switching around fairly quickly after this began to occur, but we did see that a Wagner tank crew began to be encircled by a crowd that appeared to start arguing with them. When you see the citizens of Rostov-on-Don arguing with each other here in front of the tank.
Small little melee in the street circle.
Screw you! Иди нахуй, сука, бля!
I have a feeling we'll be seeing a lot more of this to come.
You wouldn't believe it if I told you. This was actually the only incident of its kind in Rostov-on-Don the whole time. After this, Wagner was received with very open arms by the public, which was shocking to say the least. When you see the Wagner soldiers in the background observing the situation with Fedora Man, as Fedora Man begins to make an enemy of another person. I'm a player, блядь. You see my fedora? I look so serious in this thing. The sides are folded up like I'm about to be in the barbershop quartet, blядь.
My money's on the player.
My money's on playa. It really is. And of course, we could see that things were getting a little heated with the citizenry in Rostov-on-Don, while the rest of the Wagner units were getting into some serious engagements with the Russian Air Force and Russian helicopter forces far north in the area of Voronezh. We then saw after that, farther south in Voronezh, near the small town of Bertlinovka, that Wagner panzers had moved all the way off the highway, all the way away from the M4, around 40 miles away, and began to set up even out here. And it appears that the Wagner had gone through massive efforts to create some kind of an anti-air perimeter around the entirety of the M4 highway from its beginning near Rostov-on-Don to its end wherever the Wagner unit was. And we can see this right here. Here is a Wagner panzer moving through this town. And we can also see other Wagner forces have joined the panzer and are apparently a part of its security force. We can even see a second panzer was brought to this town, showing that the Wagner had an inexhaustible supply of Panzer S1s, apparently. I don't know how they got all of these, but they did have them. And this also led to rumors by multiple people saying that the Wagner may have actually been stockpiling their ammunition, and that's why they were saying that there was a drought of ammunition in Bakhmut, is because they were saving it up for this attempted coup. With that, we are now going to be moving on all the way up to Voronezh, because while we saw that air perimeters were being made, and we've seen many Russian pilots attempt to blow up those oil refineries in Voronezh and die in the attempt, we finally saw that the oil depot would end up being blown up. And so, let me go to the oil depot on fire here real quick. Well, actually, let me go to this first clip, because I actually have these in sequence, and they're a little out of order. But here's the first clip of the Ka-52 attacking the oil depot. When you see the Ka-52 flying over right here, and we see an explosion occurring in the background. It's an incredibly short clip. It was the first one that came out, though, in sequence of what was happening in Voronezh. The next clip after that would show the Ka-52 from another angle, this time in an apartment building, blowing up the oil refinery again. We can see this kid got out his phone and is recording. We see the Ka-52 right there. This lone Ka-52 from what we can tell. And we can see the oil depot blowing up over there. And we now hear the kid realizing that war just reached Voronezh.
And now it's time to panic.
He's like, oh, this is not fun. But with that, that's the end of that clip right there. And then moving on to our final one, we got a still clip a little bit later on of the oil depot on fire in Voronezh. This is, I believe, a few minutes after the Ka-52 had left the area.
Короче, бахнуло так, что вообще просто жесть.
And that's the end of that clip. But as we can see, massive damage had been caused to the oil depot in Voronezh, and it was not going to be used at all by the Wagner to help fuel their forces at this point. They were not able to protect the oil depots well enough, and they ended up being destroyed. After that, we then saw, of course, in the meantime, that the Wagner convoy had made it even further. They had cleared out that small firefight that happened in the area of Okino that we saw a little while earlier, and we saw them a few miles further up the highway now, having cleared those Russian border forces, or barrier forces, moving on into the Lipetsk region. You see their T-72B3s, and we can also see something very interesting here. We can see that the crews are actually at the ready on the tanks. So they are ready to roll these tanks immediately off the trailer as soon as the truck comes to a stop. Usually tanks are not transported in this manner, and it may even suggest that the engine may be turned on in a moment's notice, so that way the tank can fire from sitting on the trailer, which shows that the Wagner was ready to go into a fight at any given moment. We now see the next tank coming up, once again in the same configuration. And we now see them being followed by Ural 4320s. The Wagner convoy would continue to move forward at this moment unopposed. In the meantime, behind the scenes, the Ka-52 that had been in the town of Voronezh was continuing to wreak havoc, and had flown on its way out of the oil depot area, which is somewhere around here, over to the E38 highway, and then happened to fly over probably one of the worst places it could end up flying over. It flew right over Estrela anti-air system, which would then shoot it down, and that was caught on film. We can see the Russian Ka-52 right out there in the distance that just got done blowing up the depot, and there's the Wagner Strela. It literally just flew right over it. We now see the Strela lining up at Sam.
Oh, a Cadillac.
And we can see this,
How ironic.
and we hear the shell of fire, and they just hit that Ka-52 and took it down.
Was that a Z on a civilian car behind it?
It was. It was. It's a,
Oh my
it's a,
God.
It's a marketing tactic, Blair. It's normal. And now you can hear that Ka-52 exploding in the background over there.
Oh, this guy's like amused by it.
And that's the end of that clip right there. And as you see, chaos was breaking out in Voronezh. In the meantime, the Russian Air Force also decided that it would be a smart idea to bomb a highway to try and stop Wagner forces from moving forward. This happened near the area of Bugayevka in the Voronezh region, which really wasn't anywhere near any of the main Wagner forces. But here's the clip. We can see that the bombs landed right in the middle of the highway, cratering it, and making it incredibly difficult for normal 18-wheelers to pass or a military convoy. We see smoke still coming off of the highway after it had been bombed. It appears that a vehicle may have even been caught in the explosion and completely destroyed. When you see the cameraman walking towards it, we can see that in the Russians' attempt to stop the Wagner coup, it appears that they have blown away a civilian 18-wheeler. As y'all can see, the Russians are no more fragile with their own citizenry than they are with Ukraine's citizenry. It's barbarism across the board. And moving on from that clip, as we saw that the Russians began to clearly become desperate. They were already getting desperate when the multiple aircraft were being shot down around Voronezh. Blowing up civilian 18-wheelers in an attempt to crater a highway and ending up most likely killing the driver, that is also showing another level of barbarism from the Russians and desperation to try and keep control within the central government. And of course, at that exact same time, they had done nothing to stop the Wagner further north on the M4 highway as they were still closing in on Moscow. And we can see the Wagner convoy that has been filmed multiple times at this point, once again passing another part of the highway, getting closer and closer to Voronezh. I'm sorry, Moscow, correction. And with that, that's the end of that clip right there. And we're now going to be moving on out of that, and we're now going to be moving on to the next bit of news. The convoy was bombed just not that much longer after that video was made. But before we get into that, I have to ask y'all a question. Better yet, many questions have been asked to y'all in the live chat tonight that we've already had pre-prepared, because there's been loads of questions that have been moving around the internet, and many of y'all have been talking about it, and we want to hear what y'all have been thinking about some of those leading questions. And so, what have people been saying tonight, Matthew?
All right, so on our first poll, the question is, the Kremlin claims to have brokered a deal to end the coup, and Prighozin is exiled to Belarus, and what are your thoughts? 41% said I'm in disbelief, and what happened? 38% said I'm going to wait and see. 15% said that's expected, Prighozin is crazy, and 6% said unsure. And I am definitely with the 41%. I am in somewhat disbelief. I'm not really sure exactly what the objective really was. Prighozin said out loud his objective was to go to Moscow, basically dethrone the government, take over, and start a new Russia. But now it seems that he's totally given up, done a complete 180, and I really doubt we have all the details at this point. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say it's completely bizarre that it ended. It only occurred for around 23 or 22 hours. It was probably one of the shortest coups we've seen in history that was making so much success. And as y'all can see, as we continue to cover the story here, they have made incredible success. Just look at where that marker is on the map, which I cannot close because then I'll lose track of where we are in the news so far. But look at how far they had made it from Rostov-on-Don into Voronezh, and they were almost about to make it into the Tula Oblast, which would have just been one oblast away from being in Moscow. At this point, as we're covering the news right here, really at the end of it, they were only 2 hours away from Moscow, 200 kilometers away, and they stopped. And we know that the Russian garrison that was in Moscow wouldn't have been able to hold up against the Wagner unit. It was too small and too underprepared for such a thing. And the Wagner had the Russian government at their knees. I'm honestly shocked that it ended, because from what we were seeing, it was practically over for the Russian government. No one was really picking their side on the ground. Everyone was picking the Wagner side whenever they showed up. And it just didn't seem like it would end. And then it just ended all of a sudden, instantly in a flash. And so with that, I hope that addresses that, in my opinion, fairly well, because I got to be quite honest with y'all. I was in disbelief that this started to happen yesterday. I'm in disbelief it ended today so quickly. And so I hope...
Feels like we're living in the Matrix or something, the way this is going. It's not playing out the way I thought. I didn't expect the coup in the first place, and now this result is even more unexpected.
I didn't expect it, and also and a lot of people, of course, are throwing in statements that it's not even real. It's not really happening because, you know, it was all fake and everything. But Russian aircraft were lost in the dozens. I mean, at least a dozen Russian aircraft have been confirmed to have been shot down. Some of those were some of Russia's finest and rarest vehicles at this moment. They lost several Ka-52s, one of Russia's finest aircraft. They only had 100 of those at the beginning of the war. We assume that less than half of those are still in service. Most of them have been shot down in Ukraine, and another 3 to 4 of those were shot down in the coup. And from what we understand, half of those pilots didn't end up surviving. The Ka-52s do have ejection seats, but they ended up losing a decent amount of those Ka-52s. They also lost an Antonov 26 with 5 aviators on board. But we also heard multiple firefights happening along the length of the highway. And I don't care what people say, because I know that many people in the modern world can never wrap their heads around reality being exactly what it is right in front of them. But we just watched Russians killing Russians for 22 hours. There's nothing that was fake about this whatsoever. And it was absolutely surreal that it began, and it's absolutely surreal that it ended in 24 hours. And there was probably dozens of Russians dead because of this coup. And I know that's not that big of a number, especially compared to how many Russians die on the front lines in Ukraine every day. But you do have to remember, coups are never as bloody as wars are. They never are. Even if there's a lot of action going on in them like this one, they're not that bloody. For example, let's pull up and hopefully, let me find exactly where we are on that one. I'm actually going to color that one different, so that way I remember where we're at. So we'll come back to the blue marker, and that's where we left off. The 1993 Russia coup. And let's see how many people died in the 1993 Russian constitutional crisis. There were 147 people killed in that crisis and nearly 437 wounded. And that was the last time we saw anything serious like this happening inside of Russia. And there was a lot of people that got killed there. We don't even know how many Russians ended up being killed on the ground, because the Russians are going to mask that number. We do know that there was active firefights that occurred, and we do know that those forces had to have been swept aside because they didn't stop the Wagner. They did fight them, but they didn't stop them. So there must have been guys that had been killed and pushed back because of those firefights. So I would assume that the casualty number here in this coup is probably similar to the one that we saw in the 1993 coup. And going off of that, we know that this isn't fake. And y'all could get a pretty good idea. Coups just aren't that bloody. And the 1993 coup, for a lot of y'all who were alive back then, was a big deal. Everyone in the world was paying attention to Russia during that coup. And so with that, I hope that addresses that fairly well, at least in my opinion of how this is going. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And also, something else that we learned from this entire situation is we already knew that Wagner was a subpar fighting force, and how quickly they made their way through Russia, making their way up toward Moscow, was astonishing, because some people still think that Russia can hold their own, especially within their own territory, and that just basically proved that they have no chance in hell right now, because all their forces are deployed inside of Ukraine. They have nothing left inside of their country.
Hell, if the United States wanted to, we could begin an offensive straight to Moscow and probably be there within a day. At this point, we really could. Yeah. And it would be
the only thing at this point. That's why they're leaning so heavily on their nukes. They don't have anything left in their country.
They really don't. Nobody really stopped them. Everyone was more than happy to join them whenever they ran into them. Very few Russians ended up fighting against them.
Yeah, it's crazy how fast they made it through there. I'm still trying to comprehend how they made it to Voronezh. I still can't pronounce it, but they were getting so close to getting toward Moscow.
They were very close. In fact, we haven't even gotten to the end of the coup story yet. I'm just laying out the story to y'all as it happened over the past 24 hours, but we still got a lot to cover in the coup, and we're about to get to some of the crazier parts that were caught on film. But with that, we are on to the next poll.
All right, and our next one says, why do you think Prigozhin decided to give up and broker a deal with Putin to end the coup? 36% said it doesn't make any sense. 32% said he was threatened severely. 14% said unsure, and 18% said he just became cowardly and backed out. And to me, I really doubt it was the last option. To me, Prigozhin seemed like he was hell-bent on taking over the government. He had been expressing these ambitions for quite some time, and it looked like he put them into action in full force with all 25,000 to 50,000 troops that Wagner had. I would assume that he was probably threatened severely. Maybe his family was threatened. I'm not really sure if he wouldn't have seen that coming. So I'm not really sure, to be honest. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to be honest, I don't even know why he did that. It's really a mystery to me, and I think it'll probably be a mystery for everyone for decades now. All we can do is guess. Because who knows why he made that agreement with the Russians? It was clear. It was very clear. He could have taken on the Russian government and won in that moment. He was 2 hours away from Moscow. We'll get to the defenses of Moscow here in a minute and what those seem to be. There was no way in hell those were going to stand up against the Wagner if the Wagner started to fight like they had been in Bakhmut. There was no way in hell that was going to last. And yet, for some reason, he turned them around and he's now going to be exiled to Belarus. I don't really know what happened there behind the scenes to make that happen. I don't know, because the nuclear threat, I just don't think that was even on the table. Y'all got to remember that while the Russians are ruthless, they don't want to use nuclear weapons against their own people, because if they do that, they turn the public against them immediately, and the government has no support, and it's just them. And of course, and I know some people are going to say, yeah, but they still have the army. But the army would turn against the government as well, because they'd be going, they just killed my family, or something similar. I'm not going to follow these people anymore. Or they're going to kill my family. I'm not going to listen to these orders. Hell, we even saw with just the Wagner unit moving through the country, there were multiple reports. There was proof that Russian units in the army were refusing their orders because they didn't want to fight the Wagner, or they agreed with what the Wagner was doing. And so we know that there wouldn't be any support in Russia to actually use nukes. Even outside of Russia, even against someone else, I have a feeling that there wouldn't be any support there. So we know that that's entirely off the table. So then what in the world would have Prigozhin stopped for? And I can't come up with anything. I'm completely at a loss. Some people are saying he got paid, but why in the world would he? I'm not really into that idea, because think about this, y'all. Why in the world would he take maybe some money and then get poisoned later in Belarus? Because we all know that's coming. Instead of being the leader of Russia, he was poised to destroy the Russian government. There was no one who was going to stop him, except for some police outside of Moscow, and those weren't going to stand a chance. He could have been the leader of Russia, $1 trillion economy, and he could have reaped all the rewards that Putin had. He could have seized all of Putin's assets. He could have lived in that mansion down in the Caucasus. He could have gone Caucasus. He could have done anything he wanted at that point, and yet he gave up. I don't know why. It may have been that he may have actually gotten a little weak. He may have gotten soft because, Putin may have said, I don't care how many Russians die, I'm going to stop you. I'm going to kill every single citizen I have to, every single Wagner, you're going to cause nothing but death and destruction. And maybe that was enough to get Prigozhin to go, you know what, I chicken out. I don't know. I really don't know at this point. It's a complete mystery to me why in the world he would have ever agreed. Because, and we're about to get to this story. We're going to continue on the story, and y'all are about to see all the facts and information that we were able to gather through the picture and video evidence. There was no way in hell that the Russian government would have survived if the Wagner had made it to Moscow. And so with that, I hope that addresses that fairly well, at least from what I've seen. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next poll says, Putin credits Lukashenko with brokering the deal with Wagner, and what do you make of this? It looks like 37% said Putin chose Lukashenko to do it, 29% said unsure, 27% said Prigozhin is friends with Lukashenko, and 7% said he was the only one for the job. And on this one, it's somewhat of a toss-up to me. I would assume that Lukashenko was one of the only people that could have accomplished that task, because it seems like Lukashenko was willing to accept him into his country into exile. Not really sure why, but that's what he did. So once again, another confusing question to me with no clear answer. But Enforcer, what say you?
I have to say again, I don't really have an answer to that either. I don't know. I'm just at a loss. I'm at a complete loss, y'all, as to how in the world this ended the way it did. I don't think anyone will really have a good explanation why it ended this way. And to be honest, I would have to declare ignorance on that poll for that reason, because there's just no sense to anything that happened. There was no sense to why they stopped. Because once they started, y'all have to remember, once he started, there's no way back. There was no way back for him. And y'all could see that immediately. We were talking about on stream last night. you know, I was like, look, y'all, he can't just kill Shoigu and then return to the front lines with the Wagner and continue to fight in the war. No one's going to allow him to do that. And after we said that, just a few hours later, it became clear no one in the Russian government was going to allow him to do something like that. And so I just don't know. I'm going to be honest with you, I'm going to have to declare ignorance on that one. And so with that, we're on to the next one.
All right, and our last and fourth poll says, do you believe Prigozhin's coup attempt achieved some of its objectives or failed entirely? It looks like 37% said no, it failed completely, 28% said it partially achieved its goals, 18% said unsure, and 17% said yes, it achieved its objectives. And Prigozhin stated what the objective was. It was go to Moscow, like I said, and take the government out and basically replace them. They didn't achieve that very clearly, but what they did do was sow a ton of instability within inside of Russia and sow doubt that the government can control itself and its people. I don't think this is over. This is just beginning for the instability inside the country, and even though Prigozhin seems to have cut a deal, I really doubt that this is the end of it. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say this is not the end of it, and I don't think he achieved any of his goals. It's an absolute failure. The goals that he started off with was to rip apart the Ministry of Defense, and then he added an additional goal to destroy the Russian government entirely within the course of a day. And he didn't achieve any of that. He's left, from what we understand, and there's rumors going around that Shoigu's being arrested as we speak, but nobody knows if that's true or not, and there's never been any verification for that. Shoigu is still there from what we understand, Gerasimov is still there, and Putin is still there. The three guys that he went to go and take out, they're still there. So I think that he didn't achieve any of his goals, but I think he achieved a goal that wasn't his, but is ours here in the West. He has made it clear to the Russian public that there is a chance to stand up against the Russian government and win. That's one thing he's made clear. He took control of everything south of Moscow. In between Ukraine and Moscow up to Tula, he ended up coming under control of in a matter of a day. Put that into perspective. That is nearly the size of half of Ukraine, and he did that in one day because nobody was there to really stop him. And everyone, hell, was on board with him. People were sitting there as he was passing by. They were waving to the Wagner as they passed by on their way to Moscow. And so he's showing to people that there is a chance to rise up and win against the Russian government because there's nothing there anymore. There's nothing left. And on top of that, he's also sowing into the minds of the Russian public, this country is falling apart. You know, and y'all can say whatever y'all want about the countries you live in or the situation there, but nobody has ever seen a part of what would be considered the armed forces racing towards the capital to overthrow the government. Nobody has seen that anywhere recently. And the fact that that happened there, that is going to be showing to the oligarchs that they're sitting on a house of cards. That's going to be showing to the Russian public they are a card that can be flicked out and cause the entire thing to crumble. This is something that I think will be... It certainly hasn't ended here. The coup as it is today has ended. What is the implications of this in Russia have not ended. This is very similar to what happened, and let me see, Russia in 1905. Let me make sure. This is very similar to me to the 1905 Russian Revolution. I'll tell you all a little bit about this. What happened during the Russian Revolution of 1905 is that the public got really into the idea of communism in Russia. This wasn't something that happened in World War I. This is something that was already happening before World War I, as far back as 1905. And they ended up facing down the Russian government, and nearly 15,000 people were killed in this revolution, and nearly 3,600 were killed under the Imperial Army's banner of the Russian Empire. Many people died because of this, but this showed one thing in Russia, is that that current sitting government under the czars was weak, and it was going to collapse at any given moment. And this would ensure that that seed was planted in 1905 for the real revolution to happen in 1917 and to overthrow the czars and bring forward the Soviet Union. And this is what I think this has caused. This appeared to be 1917 all over again, but now what this appears to be with the ending of it right here is that it is the modern day equivalent for Russia as the Russian Revolution of 1905. This is going to pave the way, probably within the next few months, considering that there's an active war going, maybe within the next few years even, that there will be further unrest in Russia, and the current Russian government that's there probably won't last that long. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well, in my opinion. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and with that being said, we are fresh out of poll questions, but there are many more coming soon. But with that being said, we're moving on to our Super Chat questions. And up first, we have a very generous $95 Super Chat from none other than Mark, Incompetent Drone Operator. And thank you very much, Mark, for that support. He says, I think Wagner had a moderate chance of success there must have been a lot of MOD units that would have defected. And Enforcer Matt, I just don't think Nutsack intended and wanted to take on Putin, and I'm so surprised. And I'd have thought he would have thought about that before he started that venture, because he went pretty far into Russia to have basically cold feet at the last second. But Enforcer, what say you?
And I would have to agree. Everyone has to remember he was hell bent on killing everyone in the Kremlin. Pretty much, he was going up there to get everybody, from Putin to Shoigu to Gerasimov. Everyone was going to die up there, and everyone was going to pay. And then he just gave up 200 kilometers away from Moscow. And to put that, let me put that into perspective: 200 kilometers to miles. That is 124 miles. Let me measure that out on the map for y'all. Here's the outskirt of Moscow. Better yet, we'll measure from the center, because I think that's the actual measurement that people are taking. Come on. Oh, it won't let me measure on this one. Let me go to this map instead. And measure the distance. 124 miles away. They had made it all the way just south of Tula before this coup ended. That is the exact number that Prighozin gave, and we're counting this as largely being kind of around the Kremlin or the central ring of Moscow. They made it that far, and they gave up. Look how close they got. They were almost there. They had made it 70 to 80% of the way there and gave up right then and there. I don't know what in the world his plan was. I don't know why he gave up, but it was absolutely insane that he did. And I've got to be honest with you, that was an opportunity that was greatly missed by him. It's like, if you're going to do something like that, you have to have the follow through. And I think that... Mm-hmm.
It seems like if Nutsack wasn't unintelligent, which he's really a crazy guy, Nutsack is, he doesn't really have much sense. It seems like there might be some grand plan that he's planning by going to Belarus and maybe planning to retake control of Wagner and try it again, but that's giving him too much credit, so that's what's confusing me so much.
And I have to agree, that's the thing that's confusing me so much. This was a real whole-on coup. This was a real deal, and I've got to hammer that home, because there's people out there, and I've seen some people who watch our show in the live chat who said this was a smoke and mirror show. There was nothing smoke and mirror about this. This was more real than the 1993 coup, and hardly anyone died in that one. This was some real stuff. And the fact that he just gave up like that, he didn't even make it into Moscow. He just gave up before they made it there. That was weird. And to be honest with you, Mark, I would say they had a complete chance of success. Nobody stopped them. Nobody actually proved to stop them. And we did hear of firefights, and we did see that the Russian Air Force was dealing with them a little bit, but nobody was truly stopping the Wagner. They were going to make it all the way to Moscow. I bet you when they made it to Moscow, the Russian FSB that was out there on the outskirts, half of them probably would have just let them pass. And they would have made it all the way into the city, and they gave up. I don't know why they did it, but maybe it was because he had cold feet and he expected that Putin would pack up and run, and then he didn't. And then he just gave up. I don't really know. But I would say that's about as good of a guess as any. But thank you so much once again for the support, and we are on to the next one.
All right, and we also have a second super chat from Mark, Incompetent Drone Operator, who puts in a 95 once again. And thank you, Mark, very much for the very generous support. And he said, does this make Putin look stronger or weaker? And definitely weaker, in my opinion.
Definitely weaker. There's no way that this makes him look strong. It makes it look like he doesn't have control of his underlings. Wagner was his underling. Prighozin was an underling. Prighozin was his busboy, his cook in St. Petersburg. And the fact that he just sat there and nearly got overthrown by his former cook, that says a lot about how weak Putin is. And it doesn't look good when you're the leader of a nation and you have to go in front of everyone on national TV. And let me go and find it again. You have to go in front of everyone in your nation on national TV and dress down people who are coming to overthrow you and your government. That makes you look weak. Incredibly weak. It makes it look like he has no control over anything. Honestly, to me, it makes the very small thread that I still had in my mind that he may possibly be a mastermind completely unravel. He's no mastermind. This guy is nothing more than some kind of a violent thug who has the guise of looking like some kind of an intellectual, calculated KGB agent. The only reason he's lasted this long is because anyone who ever gave him a run for his money, he ended up having poisoned or killed. Now that he's not doing that, and now that he's having to actually play with people on a level footing, there are rebellions, active rebellions going on. There is rife corruption to the likes of which we haven't even seen in Russia like this before. Everything's falling apart. This guy doesn't look strong to me. This is the sign of an incredibly weak, sad leader that up until this point has killed everyone that ever stood in his way, and now that he's not, now we can see how weak and how foolish of a leader this guy is. No one I would ever sit there and give credit to, because he can't even hold his own country together. And so I hope that addresses that fairly well, in my opinion, Mark, because I certainly think he looks a lot weaker because of this. And hell, when his jet took off, like, you know, if he really wanted to make a stand, I'll tell you this, on flight radar, we never saw Ukraine's version of Air Force One in the first few days of the war. We never saw that thing fly anywhere. It stayed right in Kyiv. And I think that may have been a deliberate decision by Zelenskyy to make it clear that no one in the government was leaving where they were. They were staying right there. But the fact that Putin's jet then took off and flew all the way to Ufa and then appears to have changed its mind and flown back to Moscow may have shown that there was a plan for Putin to flee the country, and then they decided in the middle of fleeing they were going to turn around and actually face down Prighozin. May have been that something behind the scenes suggested that they may be able to weather this thing out and Prighozin would give up. But I would say this has certainly made him look to be the weakest leader in the world. There's no one in the world at this point I can think of that will look weaker than Putin right now. And so with that, thank you so much once again for the massive support, Mark, and helping this channel. And with that, we are on to the final question of this segment, and then we're going to be getting right back into the coup news, right where we left off, where the Wagner was about to be bombed on the highway.
All right, and this super chat goes to Jesus UCSB, also channel legend, who puts in a $50 donation, and thank you, Jesus, very much for that support.
Hey.
He says, "Hola, I have a master's in Homeland Security and have studies in bullies like Putin. Let me point out his body language. Most of his speeches are with him sitting and calm, and he was standing and shifting most of the speech, and I can assure you he was furious, LSA." And Jesus, I think that's an astute observation, and also the fact that he took so long to come out suggests that either he was in a panic and trying to get himself basically back under wraps to be able to talk properly, or something crazy was happening in the background that we're not even sure of. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would certainly agree with you, Jesus UCSB, and I would say that your credentials certainly back that up, that he was infuriated. You can even tell it by the way he was talking and the way he was looking at the camera, because usually he tries to give off this innocent little look. I'm just the protector of Russia. You know, I'm such a nice guy. Let me give this little speech here. Let me be the protector of the people. At that moment, you could tell behind those eyes, he was about to go, I'll kill everyone in this country to stay in charge. That's what it looked like to me. And so I would certainly agree with you. He was infuriated. And so thank you so much once again for support, Jesus. I hope I addressed that fairly well. And we're now going to be moving on out of this question segment and right back into the coup news. And I also have to let y'all know, bear with us here, because if you're waiting for Ukraine war news, we will be getting to that here in a minute. But we still have to keep track of all of the coup news that has been going on, because that was also a part of the past 24 hours of news. And so moving on into the clip where we left off, and I'm now going to recolor that to its normal color code so that way we can keep track and keep everything uniform. We could see that while the Wagner unit was moving forward, they had to stop again near the village of Voronovo to refuel and to make sure that they were ready to move on into the next leg of the trip. In the middle of this trip, and I just saw BC Skyman in the live chat, he said, you know, it's interesting that none of them were bombed, and this is where that story starts to change. The Wagner unit was bombed by the Russian Air Force, and here's the video. An airstrike was conducted on the Wagner forces almost right under this overpass, blowing away one of their trucks. And that shows us that this is, once again, this was no play. This was no thing to play out in front of the cameras as a smoke and mirror show. This was a real deal. The Russian Air Force blew away an entire truck. Who knows how many people were around that truck or in that truck? They just blew that thing away to try and stop the Wagner. And so we're going to be moving on into the next clip here, right alongside it, where we could see that there was some damage that was also caused to the highway because of this bombing that was seen later on. We can see them driving through, and they had cratered the highway. There is a Fab 500 crater right over to the side of the M4. The Russian Air Force swooped down as this convoy was resting in this area, waiting for refueling, and trying to flat out destroy them. Of course, most of their bombs kind of landed a little off the highway because accuracy isn't really a thing of the Russians, but we could see that the attempt was made here. And it's pretty insane, because that proves that this, once again, was not a smoke and mirror show. The Russians were out to kill the Wagner, and the Wagner was out to kill any Russians that stood in their way. Moving on into our next clips after that, we then began to see the first real earthworks being dug around Moscow for the defense of the city, and this was one of our first pictures of those defenses. It was from a car passing by, and we could see that the Russians had quickly dug up a defensive position and started to throw up sandbags to create an MG nest down the highway. The plan behind this position was probably to last for a very short while and notify other forces that the Wagner had arrived at this checkpoint. It probably wasn't meant to hold the entire convoy where it was. But we can see that real fortifications started to be dug outside of Moscow in preparation of the Wagner arriving. Moving on out of that, we also saw that at the exact same time, we saw the first indication that Don had arrived at Don. Akhmat had been given the responsibility, and that is the Chechens under the command of Ramzan Kadyrov, to go to the city of Rostov-on-Don and put the Wagner down without delay. And we saw the Wagner cross into the Rostov-on-Don Oblast right after we saw the first defenses being dug in the city of Moscow. This was filmed from a citizen of Russia passing by the Akhmat convoy. And when you see that Akhmat's got a lot of BTR-80s, where the hell were those in Ukraine? They didn't use those in Ukraine. They've had those in Chechnya the entire time, ready to put down the Chechens if they rise up. That's why they're here.
They were saving those for their own people.
They said, everyone at Don, we're in Ukraine at Don. Everyone went, oh, look at them, they're TikTok guys. Man, they wouldn't have been TikTok guys if the Chechens had risen up. They had enough firepower to blow away everyone in Chechnya if they needed to.
This would have been no fun in the games at Dawn. We would have blown away everyone at Dawn. Every single man, a woman, and a child who stood up against us at Dawn. We had more than enough equipment at Dawn.
And we can now see all the Kamazs passing by. And we can also see an Akhmat there in the back of the armored car that the Chechens produce inside of Chechnya. We now see some more BTR-80s. I mean, really, where the hell was the stuff in Ukraine when they were getting blown away? They just didn't bring any of this in.
The Chechens must have known it was going to be a losing battle in Ukraine for them, and they figured they wouldn't risk all their best equipment.
Maybe. Because it's so bizarre to see all the stuff that we never saw them using in Ukraine. And we see the rest of the convoy coming up, some civilians mixed in there, or it may even be Kadyrovites using civilian vehicles.
The funny part is, even if you give these Chechens the best equipment, they're so ill-trained and horribly equipped, just generally, they couldn't really do anything anyway.
Nah, I wouldn't count on them to do anything properly or effectively. They would still fail and fall flat on their faces. But we could see there that things were going to start heating up in Rostov-on-Don, and while this convoy passed over the Rostov-on-Don border, well, the Rostov Oblast border, the Wagner was immediately being notified that the Kadyrovites were on their way, and the Wagner began to immediately mine the roads leading into Rostov-on-Don and erect roadblocks heading south. We can see the roadblock here, and we can see that they've also set up a very sad string of mines across the road, like that would stop anyone, like they wouldn't just get out and shove those to the side of the road and then drive on.
Or just drive right to the left a couple feet.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really know what the plan was with that one, but we can see that they were giving it a half-assed attempt.
Well, I hope they don't take the side road, bliat. You know, that whole 10-foot section with no mines.
Oh man, you know, speaking of blowing up, Matthew, like the mines, we saw that the Wagner actually ended up getting hit pretty severely rather than just the airstrike, because another Ka-52 flew down just north of Voronezh, in the area of Yelets, and ended up blowing away a Wagner vehicle, flew right over it and blasted the thing. So here's the clip. This person was waking up to an early morning, enjoying their breakfast, and looked out the window and said, "Oh, look, it's the Russian helicopter force. What are they doing around here at this time of day?" Well, they're killing Wagner is what they're doing. But you see them firing the missile, and poof, there goes a Wagner vehicle. Now, moving down the road is a burning wreck. And we now see the Ka-52 turning off the highway after it destroyed one of the Wagner vehicles. Is this coup real enough for y'all yet? Because it's getting realer. The people are being blown up. It's getting pretty real. But at the same time that the Wagner was actually getting hit up there near Yelets, at the same time we saw that the locals began to support Wagner inside of Rostov and started to fight locals that were condemning the Wagner. We can see locals coming around and getting in an actual fist fight with a citizen who did not like Wagner being there. And we see the Wagner actually having to come in and try and break up the fight. They're like, guys, I understand you agree with us and everything, but you can't be beating people in the street, boy. What do you think this is? Ukraine? This is Russia. We don't allow this here. You know, we'll allow the maiming of citizens by the military, but we won't allow it from each other.
You're right. All of a sudden, Wagner's the voice of reason here.
Yeah. Also, Astro said, all of our Wagner keep blowing up. And we see the confrontation is still going on a little bit more. We see the argument still going on. And that's seeing that clip, but we can see that the locals were beginning to support the Wagner while everything else was happening even further north. Meanwhile, in Moscow, more positions were being prepared. Here's a picture. Oh, buddy, they're really going to stop them with an AGS and some sandbags, I'll tell you that. And once again, this is kind of the thing I'm trying to hit home to all of y'all. This was what was going to defend the great city of Moscow, a population of 11 million people, home of the Russian government and the president of Russia, was an AGS and some sandbags and a couple of poorly prepared Russian soldiers. That was the defenses to Moscow.
Now, I know Wagner's incompetent, but that's a little bit underestimating them, just a tad.
The Wagner is incompetent?
Yeah, they're incompetent. You saw what they were doing in Ukraine.
Compared to the Russian army, the Wagner is like Delta 6. Hell, I even came up with something there. The Wagner is like SEAL Team 6 compared to the Russian army, because look at what the Russian army does. Oh, but yeah, this will hold back whole convoy. Just take AGS, some sandbags. I'm sure it'll hold for hours, weeks even. Like, what the hell was the plan here? I don't even know what the plan was, but we can see that this was their defensive positions that they were setting up around Moscow to defend the city. And if the Wagner had made it there and this was all they were going up against, the Russians wouldn't have stood a chance. The Wagner would have won. And so we're going to be moving on from that and on into the next one, where we saw that the Akhmat had made it further into Rostov and they were getting closer to Rostov-on-Don. But you see them passing by right here. And of course, what you see is that column of BTR-80s. And they seem pretty excited to go and kill their own brethren. They're going, oh my god, I'm going to become a TikTok celebrity today. And that's the end of that clip, but y'all could see that the Chechens were beginning to close in. Meanwhile, the Wagner had finally made it to Yelets, and we saw our first video footage of them finally entering the perimeter of Yelets. Actually, this was reported by OSINT Technical, but at this point, and let me make sure, this was at 7:33 in the morning today, the Wagner had finally reached Yelets. And their progress beyond Yelets would actually end up speeding up greatly. Moving on from that, we also heard that the Wagner had finally arrived in the Tula Oblast just an hour after that. Here is the news and the video of them, for the first time, being in Tula. This was in the Tula region, neighboring the Moscow region, according to local Russian media. Here were the pictures of their convoy as it started to move into Tula, and they were about, and I'll show y'all, when this picture was made, they were around right here. They were in this area. You can see that it's a forested road, and they were sitting there pulled over on the side of it, and that's where those pictures came from. And so it was confirmed just hours after they had made it into Yelets. They had already raced their way all the way up into the border of Tula and were now just one oblast away from Moscow. They were getting incredibly close at this point. Now moving on from that, we also saw that the Russians were also beginning to panic and were creating as many defenses around Moscow as possible. And they said, quick, pull out the police. The police have cracked open a lot of protesters' skulls, but I have a feeling that it'll be very difficult for them to hit the Wagner with a baton because the Wagner has AKs. They probably only have several AKs. We can see in the next picture 2 different uniforms. We can even see that this guy is wearing one of those Alton helmets without the visor. I don't even know where the hell they got that. That's an antique. The Russians haven't used those for a pretty long while. They're considered collectibles now, but this guy is wearing a full-on Alton helmet, and this guy here doesn't even have a magazine in his AK. So we can get a pretty good idea that the defenses of Moscow were going to be exquisite. Moving on from that...
The Russian civilians are going to be running around Moscow talking about, police, police! And then you see the Russian police being chased around by Wagner with batons. Blyat, he's beating him on the head, Blyat.
Also, we could see a Russian soldier, well, a Russian policeman, a Slav squatting on the top of a police van, and we can also see that they have an AK machine gun. I forgot the name of that one. I'm so sorry, everyone. I believe it's an AKM. I'm not really sure. It's an RPD. They had an RPD on top of the police van, and he also had an AK carbine. And we can see that it's really getting to him. He's like, oh crap, we're about to be in the battle right in Moscow. This is not going to be good. And moving on from that picture and on into the next one, we also saw the sandbag picture again. And then in the last one, we saw the Russians sending out some Mi-17s. These appear to have been unarmed, so they may have been reconnaissance Mi-17s and Mi-8s meant to find any Wagner forces if they were making their way to the city. At the same time, the Akhmat had made it to the outskirts of Rostov. This video was confirmed to be right here. And so here's the clip. They were only 15 minutes away from getting into the center of Rostov-on-Don. While this video was being filmed, the Wagner forces began to tell the citizens to disperse and go to their homes as a firefight was expected immediately with the Akhmat forces. And as you can see, things were really starting to heat up inside of Rostov-on-Don. Y'all wouldn't believe it, though. It wouldn't heat up that much. Anyways, the roads were being cleared further up on the E115 highway as they were continuing to advance well beyond Yelets, well on into Tula, and were making their way with great speed. We saw that the Russians tried to make some kind of a roadblock at this point in the highway with dump trucks. The Wagner just pushed those off the side of the road. Believe it or not, you can just disengage the parking brake on these things and they just move out of the way. Who would have thought? And so they just move the convoy on through.
Дорогу, видимо, пытались перекрыть на Москву. Вагнера, видимо, расхуячили, раскатали, блядь. Гуслями нахуй. В ту сторону закрыто.
When you see the other roadblock on that side.
Натворили, нахуй. Расхуярили.
And the convoy is on its way.
Колонна дальше пошла.
Right now, Matthew Shoigu said, oh, those dump trucks ought to be able to stop the Wagner from reaching any further. And then someone ran into his office. Shoigu! They broke through the dump trucks. And Shoigu said, my neck will be in a noose. He said it's going to be in a noose. It can't be. What do you mean dump trucks can roll? So then the Ministry of Defense decided what the smart idea would be is to just pull out some backhoes and start ripping up the road instead. So here's a video of them a few miles north of that starting to just rip the road right up.
Стою перед Чеплынским районом. Короче, все. Нам больше не проехать.
Shoigu said, there is no way in the hell they can pass this place. And so, while the Ministry of Defense was trying to figure out some kind of an effective blockade, they started digging anti-tank ditches in the streets of Moscow. Look at this thing. Now, that's a trench.
Damn.
I mean, like
Jeez,
they were doing some real earthworks. You know, once again, to reiterate the idea, this is no smoke and mirror show. These people were actually trying to stop a tank from rolling through Moscow. That's what this was for. And so y'all can see that right there, Bliad. That is confirmation. Anyways, somehow, I don't know how, I feel like this is like the Star Wars movie now where they say somehow Palpatine returned. Somehow, the Wagner got a hold of dozens of S-300 surface-to-air missile systems and began to deploy them around Rostov-on-Don. Here's a video of them all just showing up in Bataysk, which is just south of Rostov-on-Don. I'll show you where that is. It is right here. And these were all around the highway right here. Actually, kind of like on this overpass area here. So this was in Wagner-controlled territory, and these were S-300s being operated by the Wagner. The skies over Rostov-on-Don were about to be closed to the Russian Air Force beyond this point. Moving on from that and on into what happened after that, while the Akhmat was entering Rostov-on-Don, no firefight was ever heard of. We don't know what happened to what the Akhmat was supposed to do. They were supposed to crush the Wagner. They never did. We never even heard of a firefight happening in Rostov-on-Don once they arrived. So I guess they kind of just hung out outside of the town and they never entered it. Who knows? But at the same time, the convoy had now only made it 2 hours away from Moscow. They had made it all the way to the town of Novomoskovsk. This is as far as they would make it right here. And so, here is the video of the convoy only 2 hours away from Moscow City. At this point, somehow they had even gotten a police escort. I don't know how that works, but here's the video. And just look at them. They're on their way to Moscow. They're just 2 hours away. The Russians were panicking at this point. It appeared that Moscow would fall. And the only obstacle left was this one bridge right here over what is called the Oka River. The Oka River is the only natural barrier that was left at that point in between the city of Moscow and the oncoming Wagner forces. And the Oka River is right here. Oh, actually, I'm sorry, that's not the M4's bridge. Let me go find the M4. Here is the M4's bridge. This was the last obstacle going into Moscow. If they made it over that bridge and that bridge was not blown up, they would make it all the way to Moscow completely unopposed. There was going to be nothing that would stop them from that point on. And so, what the Russians did is they did something very smart. They went and blocked the Oka River Bridge with dump trucks. Like, they didn't just go through that blockade like an hour or two earlier. So there it is. You can see the dump trucks up there on the bridge going over the Oka River. For some reason, they didn't want to blow it up. And you can also see right there, it clearly says R, which means river, and Oka. So that is the Oka River right there. The last thing to Moscow, the Oka River. And we can now see their convoy. I'm going to skip past this because you all already saw that for the large part. There's their convoy moving towards the Oka River again. At the same time, we finally got one other footage near the area of Talovaya, a small village near the M4 highway in the Voronezh Oblast, of a downed Ka-52. Russian firefighters had responded to the scene and began to douse the blaze, and both pilots in this Ka-52 ended up not ejecting, and therefore went down with a helicopter. Once again, another couple of confirmed kills that the Wagner was able to claim. Moving on from that, we are starting to get towards the end of this coup. 200 kilometers away from Moscow, just 200 kilometers, a supposed deal was starting to be struck. And we started to hear the first utterings of that from the Spectator Index. And they said there has so far been no comment from the Kremlin about a deal with the Wagner group. That's what they said at that moment. And then they said Wagner's PMC Prighozin has accepted to start negotiations with the Kremlin, says convoys will return to bases to avoid bloodshed, although blood had already been shed at that point. And then right after that, just 10 minutes after that, the Wagner agreed that they would begin to withdraw from Rostov Oblast and Rostov-on-Don as well. No shots had been fired in between the Akhmat and the Wagner, and we then heard from the Spectator Index that they were going to start leaving Rostov. And at this point, the coup was over. The Wagner then began to prepare to leave, and we could see a video of this right here. We can see that people in the street were treating the Wagner as though they were heroes, hugging them, shaking their hands as they were beginning to depart and head back to their camps back in Ukraine and end the coup.
Oh yes, good job.
Good job, everyone. We only killed about 28 pilots, maybe 12 planes. It's not bad. And that's the end
Oh
of...
yes.
That's
We didn't even make it to Moscow, but congratulations.
I mean, like, we still did pretty good. And then we could even see that the crowd just stood around and was just cheering the Wagner. I mean, these people ended up disliking the Wagner when they arrived, and by the time the Wagner left, they were loving these people. Moving on from that clip, of course, we could see that the Wagner was given the legal immunity right after that, and Prighozin was now going to be exiled to Belarus. This came from Fatyuk News, or Fatyuk's News, I believe is the best way to say it. The criminal case against Prighozin will be dropped, and he will move to Belarus, Kremlin says. Now, the Kremlin has put this into very kind words, but him moving to Belarus will be permanent. He will not be returning to Russia, and this means he is being exiled from Russia, and that is a part of the agreement. At the same time, another part of the agreement that we understand is that the Wagner was to leave the areas that they had now occupied and return back to their camps to receive further orders from the Russian Ministry of Defense. We then saw the Wagner finally leaving Rostov 22 hours after the coup had begun, and around 18 hours after they had taken complete control of Rostov-on-Don. Prighozin the entire time had remained within the headquarters of the Southern Military District, and he was here overseeing the withdrawal of Wagner forces from Rostov-on-Don. We then saw, after this, that Prighozin finally left in the back of a black SUV, most likely to begin his journey to Belarus. Putin has promised that under Prigozhin's trip to Belarus, he will not be harmed by the Russian government, the Russian military, or any Russian government forces. However, there has been no guarantees made of his safety in Belarus. We did see, however, that as he left in the SUV out of the Southern Military Headquarters, he was cheered by the crowd in the area as he began to leave. We could see that transport trucks were also stopped, so that way Prigozhin's car could make it out of the command headquarters. And there's Prighozhin right there in the back of the van. You see him shaking hands with people. And thus,
I'll be honest, I'm really not sure what they're cheering him on about, because he basically wimped out the last second, and also they're totally forgetting the fact of what they've done in Ukraine with civilians.
You know, it's a good point, Matthew. It completely negates that the guy's a war criminal and has killed thousands of Ukrainian citizens and soldiers, and that his unit has been known and has been seen to commit terrible atrocities, the likes of which had never been seen. And these people are cheering someone on that was supposed to be liberating Russia and just gave them up again. But nonetheless, y'all can see that Prighozin, for his acts against the Russian government for inciting an armed rebellion, is being treated as a hero by the Russian public. But with that video, that very last clip that we saw of Prighozin leaving the headquarters of Rostov-on-Don, the coup came to an end 22 hours after it began. That is the entire story. The end. That was the whole story from start to finish. Psych, he's back. But that was the whole story from start to finish, beginning to end, from last night when we first reported that a Russian civil war had begun to right now when the armed rebellion ended. That was every single video and every single picture that came out from it that we were able to cover on air. That is the entire story summarized. Well, actually not summarized. That is the entire story laid out with every single detail that we could confirm on film. So now that we've gotten through this wild past 24 hours of news and all of the crazy crap that happened because of it, now I've got to show y'all how little news we have to cover on Ukraine. There's practically none. I think let me count them. There was only 5 bits of news and video clips that we got from Ukraine today because everything was focusing on the Russian coup attempt. If you would like to see this map, because this is actually a completely separate map from our normal daily Ukraine war map, there is a link in the description to this one below. It's called the Russian Rebellion map. This one will only be shown on this stream today and the stream yesterday because it really only pertains to these streams. It will not pertain going here forward, and so we've completely removed all of that news from our normal Ukraine war map, although it's kind of involved with it. So now, we're going to be moving on from the Russian coup, which y'all can still get in the link in the description below, and we're now going to be moving on into the Ukraine war news, starting off with our first bit, where we saw that in the middle of the entire coup, in the middle of the armed rebellion going on, we saw that the Russians ended up firing some short-range ballistic missiles at the Ukrainians here. When you see those missiles being launched right there and taking off in the skies to go and attack Ukrainian citizenry. You now see those missiles flying on into the sky. And I would have to agree with you, Bonnet. It wasn't a great ending to the story. I mean, like, it was, you know, if that was an ending to a TV show story, everyone would have gone, what the hell are the writers, stupid? Like, that's what everyone would have said. But, you know, it's real life. And real life can sometimes have bad endings to stories like that, completely anticlimactic. Anyways, moving on to the next bit of news, we also got to see the Russian casualty report for the past 24 hours. Over the past 24 hours.
They got 3 Bobcats. What do you know? Do we have any Bobcat memes?
I think we may. Actually, I don't think we do. We gotta have one. Wait, is this considered a special equipment now? It's the Enforcer. He's definitely special in some. Oh man!
Yeah,
3
Bobcats
Bobcats for
equipment
Matt.
with a broom. Wonderful, wonderful.
And 3 Bobcats for Matt. And I would say that's certainly special equipment. I'm not going to lie. I was thinking about that. That certainly is special equipment. And so moving on into the rest of the casualty report, we can see that the Russians didn't really take incredibly high losses in any category. They were mostly average, except for one, which was the artillery again. They lost 580 soldiers, 6 armored personnel carriers, 23 supply trucks, 7 tanks, 30 artillery pieces, 13 drones, 2 MLRSs, 1 helicopter. Of course, that doesn't include all the helicopters that the Wagner shot down during the rebellion. 14 cruise missiles, 4 anti-aircraft systems, and the 3 special equipment vehicles. It was mostly average. It wasn't that bad of a day. Moving on from that bit of news, and on into the only 2 bits of news that we got from the front line today, which were both from the south. We saw near Staromanivka that the Azov unit had attacked the Russians in the Zaporizhia direction. And we're going to have to mute the heavy metal, but we can see a abandoned BMP-3 that the Russians were using, and we can see that it's already smoking, and the Azov is continuing to drop bomblets on it to attempt to destroy it. We now see them dropping another bomblet. And I gotta be honest with y'all, I know that I kind of sound a little quiet right now while we watch these videos, but it is absolutely like whiplash for me to go from a civil war pretty much breaking out in Russia for a day and then going right back to the war as usual. It is just so weird to me mentally. I'm like, okay, we're back to war. It's like, man, this is weird. But we can now see that BMP-3 roasting. And I got to tell you, man, that thing is roasted better than son of Wagner was after that Ka-52 hit them, man. That thing was like a freaking barbecue. When you see it puffing out a little smoke here and there. Oh, look, a smoke ring. Oh, they zoomed in off of it.
Sure
look,
is.
a smoke ring. Oh, I get it. You vape. We see that as the day passed, it burned out the entire wheat field, and the BMP-3 is still burning. And now we can see the remains of that burned out vehicle. Very nice. Well, that we're now going to be moving on from that little bit of news right there and on into our other bit of news at the southern front, where we saw some Ukrainian soldiers in the 47th Brigade are continuing to push forward atop there Bradley. We can see the 25mm Bushmaster down there. We can see the TIL launchers, and we can see the 47th flag right here in front of the world to see. And from what we've heard, they are making advances. I'll show you all the deep state map here real quick. Over the past 24 hours, this is... Let me make... Oh, wait a minute. Oh, wait a minute. They updated the map to show how far the Prighozhin's guys had made it.
Oh
that's
my
funny.
god. Oh, that's cool.
But they didn't even show the whole thing, because they made it all the way up to Novomoskovsk. They made it all the way up here. So I don't know why they haven't added that in yet. But I mean, like, when you really put that into perspective, they made it close. They made it farther in a day from the Ukrainian border to Moscow than the Russians made from the Ukrainian border to Kyiv ever. Or anywhere for that matter. They traveled more distance just trying to get to Moscow than any Russian military unit has trying to push the Ukrainians back in this war, which is really insane. But anyways, moving on from that, that is the only other picture that we have in that area. And also to get back to this, to show you all the advances they had made, this are the advances that the Ukrainians made over the past 24 hours, right here. There was some advances in every direction, as you can see, but they weren't incredibly large, to be honest with y'all. When the Ukrainians announced that they were conducting a front-wide offensive, I've got to be quite honest, not to be critical, I expected that there was going to be more ground taken, but it was a little bit smaller than expected. But still, it's good to know that they were able to seize an opportunity to get a little bit of land, even if it was a smaller amount across the entirety of the front line. So with that, we're now going to be moving on out of the Ukraine war news. Believe it or not, we just covered all of it in 4 bits of news. And we're now going to be moving on to the speech from President Volodymyr Zelenskyy. And I hope he doesn't. I hope he doesn't have that translator. Everyone, dear Ukrainians.
Dear Ukrainians, all the people of the world, good health to you. Today is a day when there definitely should be no silence. And we definitely need leadership. Today, the world saw that the bosses of Russia do not control anything. Nothing at all. Complete chaos. Complete absence of any predictability. And it is happening on Russian territory, which is fully loaded with weapons. We all remember how the head of Russia threatened the world in 2021. He had some ultimatums. He was trying to show a kind of strength. The year 2022 showed that he confused his illusions and the lies he was fed with strength. They in the Kremlin are capable of resorting to any terror, capable of resorting to any stupidity, but they cannot provide even 1% of the necessary control. And they are the real problem. In one day, they lost several of their million-plus cities and showed all Russian bandits, mercenaries, oligarchs, and anyone else how easy it is to capture Russian cities and probably arsenals with weapons. Now, it is very important that no one in the world remains silent because of being afraid of this Russian chaos. All the actions of the leaders now can be historic. Every word of journalists is worth its weight in gold. It is necessary to clearly name the source of the problem. And if someone in the world tries to ignore the situation, if someone in the world is under the illusion that the Kremlin is capable of regaining control, This only postpones the problem until the next breakthrough of chaos, even more dangerous. We all know the solution. First, the world should not be afraid. We know that only our unity protects us. Ukraine will definitely be able to protect Europe from any Russian forces, and it doesn't matter who commands them. We will protect. The security of Europe's eastern flank depends only on our defense. And that is why every manifestation of support for our defense is support for your defense, everyone in the free world. Ukrainian soldiers, Ukrainian guns, Ukrainian tanks, Ukrainian missiles are all that protect Europe from such marches as we see today on Russian territory. And when we ask to give us the F-16 fighters or the ATACMS, we're enhancing our common defense. Real defense. This is what is needed. Now is the time to provide all the weapons necessary for defense. Second, everything must be real. It's time for everyone in the world to frankly say that all of Russia's criminal actions against Ukraine were and are unprovoked. And we all have to focus exclusively on our common security priorities. NATO is not just a word or a set of formal promises. These are reliable guarantees for everyone that peace won't be destroyed. Without Ukraine, such guarantees are worthless. Already in July at the summit in Vilnius, it is a historic chance for real decisions without looking back at Russia. Any nation that borders Russia really supports this. And the third, I will say it in Russian. The man from the Kremlin is obviously very afraid and probably hiding somewhere, not showing himself. I am sure that he is no longer in Moscow. He calls somewhere and asks something. He knows what he is afraid of because he himself created this threat. All evil, all losses, all hatred, he himself who spreads it. And the longer he can run between his bunkers, the more you all will lose. All who are connected with Russia. What will we, Ukrainians, do? We will defend our country. We will defend our freedom. We will not be silent and we will not be inactive. We know how to win, and it will happen. Our victory in this war will definitely be. And what will you do? The longer your troops stay on Ukrainian land, the more devastation they will bring to Russia. The longer this person is in the Kremlin, the more disasters there will be. And now I'm switching to my native language. Thanks to our soldiers, thanks to everyone who is now beating the occupiers. Thanks to the Air Force for protecting our skies. Glory to Ukraine. We will defeat everyone.
And with that,
And Hero Slava.
and Slava Ukraini. And with that, that is the end of the speech from President Volodymyr Zelenskyy here on the 486th day of the war. And it begins to beg a question while I sit there and almost flip my phone out of my lap. What in the world have all of you been saying about some of the leading questions of tonight? And so with that, what do we got, Matthew?
All right, let's hop into our first poll, which says, despite the deal brokered between Prighozin and Putin, is Prighozin a dead man walking? 62% said yes, he is. 9% said unsure. 15% said probably so, but unclear. And 14% said no, they can't risk creating a martyr with Prighozin getting killed. And to me, I would say that there is no circumstance where Prighozin gets to walk away from this unharmed. Even if he's allowed to go to Belarus like they've claimed, he will be eventually poisoned and killed over there. You do not get to threaten the president of Russia and simply walk away from that unharmed. That simply doesn't work that way. But Enforcer, what say you?
Dead man walking. We got a dead man walking over here. He's dead. He's already dead at this point. He's just waiting for the death sentence. So with that, I hope that does address that, in my opinion, fairly well. And we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next poll says, U.S. officials say the Putin-Prighozin deal likely included removing Shoigu from his post, and what are your thoughts? 39% said yes, Shoigu is getting removed. 32% said no, I highly doubt that he's gone. 21% said unsure, and 8% said, maybe just a reprimand, question mark. And on this one, I'm kind of unsure. I really don't see Shoigu getting completely removed from his post, because so far, he's one of the only generals that Putin has to make sure that anything runs even closely to competent, which is not saying a lot. So I personally doubt that he's gone. But Enforcer, what say you?
Shoigu, you're going to keep your job. Dude, Shoigu is not getting removed. Shoigu's been there since Putin took power. So I would highly doubt that he'll be removed under any circumstance, really, because Putin has always counted on him for all the corrupt dealings that have been going on in the background in the army. So, I think he'll be staying there for a while, in my opinion. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next poll says that the Wagner coup seemingly failed, but instability in Russia remains high, and what most likely happens next. 44% said factions will start forming in Russia, 28% said everything goes back to normal, 19% said Putin's government will turn on him, and 9% said Wagner will regroup and attempt again. And one thing to me that certainly is not going to happen is everything goes back to normal. Russia will be forever changed from this point forward. The instability caused by this coup attempt will affect everyone in the country, and we're going to see that the Putin government starts to have some probably pretty big issues within their own little system there. We've already heard that there's some internal struggles going on, but now we're seeing that it's going to start coming more to the forefront. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would say I think that we're probably going to see that there's going to be a lot of fallout from what happened with Prighozin. He just showed to everyone in Russia that it's possible to rise up against the Russian government and succeed, as long as you have the will to carry it on through. So I think that there will probably be a lot more instability, infighting, and rebellion that may happen in Russia during this war or after the war as a result of this. And so with that, I hope that addresses that fairly well in my opinion, and we are on to the next one.
And the next one says, Ukraine launched widespread offensives during Prigozhin's coup, and no success has been seen yet. And what are your thoughts? 62% said, let's wait for more news. 12% said Ukraine acted too soon. It was a bad move. 11% said unsure. And 15% said Ukraine was forced to make an attempt. And to make a concrete conclusion, of course, we would need to wait for more news. But I will say that I think Ukraine might have acted a little too quickly. The opportunity looked perfect. And when something looks too perfect, sometimes it can be a trap. I'm not saying that's exactly what it is, but I think they should have waited a day and saw what happened today, which was a pretty shocking revelation. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would say that they did act far too quickly. Considering that the coup had just begun a few hours before they began their front-wide offensive, I would say that clearly showed there hadn't been enough time that passed. For all the soldiers on the line, the coup may as well have not even happened as far as their condition was. They did stop for a little bit, yes. They did stop firing artillery for a while, but they were probably doing that just to try and figure out what was happening, or if there were going to be any orders that told them to move off the line. So I think it was probably done a little too quickly, in my opinion. They should have waited maybe a couple of days to see how it would have gone, and then if it went well, then conduct a front-wide offensive, because then things would truly be in chaos. And if things had not gone well, like they did, then nothing would have been lost of value. And so with that, I hope that does address that, at least in my opinion, fairly well. And we are on to the next one.
All right, and with that being said, as everyone loves to hear, we are fresh out of polls once again, and that is all for the night. So we are moving on to our super chat questions. We'll answer all of those, and then move on to our live chat questions and answer as many as possible. So our first super chat question goes to Jill Tensiozzo, and I'm probably butchering it. And Jill puts in a $50 donation and says, sorry I missed most of your coverage due to out-of-town visitors, and have you discussed nukes transferred to Belarus? Now Wagner. Putin pretending to make a deal to let Wagner deal in any way with nukes, or is it a coincidence?
And I would say, and it's perfectly fine. I understand. Out of town friends, you gotta make the time for them, because they're not going to be around for long. So that's completely fine. That is, I pardon you. But I would say we have talked about the nukes being transferred to Belarus, but I would say they're certainly not being transferred to Wagner, because it's not a good look if they somehow end up in the hands of Wagner after they just committed a coup against the government. And we all have to remember, this was not a fake coup. This wasn't a play for everyone around the world. And I also have to remind everyone, I know in the modern world, it's kind of like the chic thing and the cool thing to say that everything's always fake. You can sit there and watch someone get their brains blown out on a subway and everyone go, oh, that's fake. That's to distract from the pigeon who just took a crap on a rich person's car up on the street. But no, it's things you see are just happening. That guy just got his brains blown out on the subway and was just murdered. It wasn't a distraction or anything. The guy just got flat out murdered, and that's what it was. And that's what we saw in Russia. There was no play. There was no smoke and mirror show, because that smoke and mirror show you're going to see here in the future is going to greatly affect the domestic situation, the home front situation in Russia. So I don't think that this was anything to try and move Prigozhin to Belarus, because why in the world did they have to come up with a Why in the world did they have to come up with an elaborate plan to move him to Belarus? They could just move him there. They could just say, here's a plane ticket, go there. Does anyone in the normal world need elaborate plans to go anywhere? Like, for example, does the U.S. president have to nuke Taiwan to then travel there and have a reason for it? No, he just hops on a plane and he flies to Taiwan if he wants to. And that's what I believe. It's something that isn't really popular anymore in the modern world, is just to say what's happening in front of our faces is what's actually happening. But that's what's actually happened. It was a coup. It was a straight up coup attempt. We saw them digging up highways, bombing highways. We saw them bombing people in Russia, gunning down buses if they needed to try and stop these people. That is nothing fake about that whatsoever. And considering it went on for a whole day, adds a lot of proof that it was no fakery whatsoever. And people died. Helicopters were shot down. Planes were shot down. Valuable pilots that the Russians don't really have many of and don't really have a way to train well anymore, they're being killed. And I would have to say that was nothing to try and just move Wagner and Prigozhin to Belarus, because even at right now as we're speaking, the Wagner is being ripped apart by the Ministry of Defense, and its forces are being distributed throughout the entirety of the Russian army, which is a curse in its own right, and I don't think they're understanding what that's going to do, because right now they have a double-edged sword with Wagner. If they stay intact, they're going to be a political entity that is strictly against the Russian government and is a unified force. They're now going to spread these people out with these thoughts in their head, so that way they can infect the rest of the Russian army with their rebellious nature against the Russian government. And that's what they're going to be doing with these Wagner guys. And it's not going to end well for them in that right. And that also means that the Wagner isn't moving to Belarus, because we're already hearing those reports that they're ripping up the Wagner and they're making sure it doesn't exist. They're integrating it into the Russian army, and it'll just be a part like every other. And so I would say that it is coincidence that Belarus got nukes and then Prigozhin will be sent there. I don't think it's so that way Prigozhin can end up having control of the nuclear weapons. Because there is no way in hell, especially with what Prigozhin just did, that Putin would go, yes, I should give the guy who wanted to destroy the Russian government nuclear weapons. That would be something I don't think would ever happen. But still, thank you so much, Jill, for the support, and I hope I answered that fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next super chat goes to JRG Projects, who puts in a $20 donation. And thank you very much for that support and supporting our work. And JRG says, my prediction is Bakhmut was a failure and Wagner's mission, and Putin now will purge the incompetent MOD, and then Wagner itself. A desperate general mobilization order be carried out with the new MOD leadership, and a complete reset of the war.
And I thank you for the support. I would say that there's certainly going to be a purge of the Wagner. They're going to be taking care of people they need to take care of and distributing the rest of them around the army. I don't know about the MOD, though. I don't know if Shoigu is going to disappear, because Shoigu has been there for a while, and Putin has to count on corrupt cronies like that to keep that government running. And so I don't think he'll be gone, because he just stuck his neck out for Shoigu. He stepped out and said, we're going to destroy the Wagner to defend the government, which means that he was pro-Shoigu at that point. So I don't think anything's really going to happen to Shoigu. Maybe some other stuff will happen inside the Ministry of Defense, but still, it is a bizarre situation. So really anything could happen at this moment. And so thank you once again for the support. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Billy Gomes, who puts in a $20 donation. And thank you, Billy, very much for that support. He says, the only thing that makes any sense to me is that they had Prigozhin's family. I know he has a wife and 3 kids in Russia. What do you think? I know it's just speculation, but it explains stopping when he had the upper hand.
I would say maybe they did do something like that. Maybe they were holding his family hostage. But he didn't say anything about that, and I have a feeling, knowing Prigozhin, if they had done something like that, he would have been out on a video saying, they have taken my family hostage, and he would have been freaking out and everything, and everyone would have known about it. Who knows? Maybe they said if he told anyone about it, they would kill him anyways. Who really knows? That may be what happened, is that they held his family hostage, and so that's why he ended up giving in. Who knows? But that may be a pretty good reason, that may be a pretty good explanation as to why that happened. No one will really ever know, so really any answer is the correct answer at this point, because nobody's really going to know what actually happened in that until decades after. And so, thank you so much once again for the support, and we are on to the next one.
And our next super chat goes to Dutch Arjen, who puts in a $20 donation, and thank you so much for that support. They said Prigozhin and his men are mercenaries, likely not paid by Putin. By the way, Russia is likely going broke, and yes, they are. And Prigozhin, to save his own skin, shake down Putin. Prigozhin is charismatic and well-liked with tens of thousands of guns, not easy to simply remove. And also, to add to my super chat, Prigozhin would likely not have much resistance by most armed groups in Russia, as he's well-liked by the rank and file. However, he has to get paid to keep his men happy.
And that's true. He does. Wagner, from what we understand, though, is paid by the Ministry of Defense, which falls under the command of Putin, since Putin is the commander-in-chief. I would say that may be the reason why, that may be the case, but I don't think, and some people have been throwing around the idea that the Wagner was paid by the United States to do something like this. If they were, then we would be demanding just compensation or a refund for their shoddy performance and only standing up for 22 hours. They didn't even do anything.
Oh no, I doubt that. If we did pay them, and this is all they did, we'd probably just chalk it up to whatever. And Prigozhin heads out. Nobody ever mentions it again.
Maybe that may be the case as well. Who knows? But it is fairly interesting to see what happened. I'll just have to say that it was fairly interesting to see what happened. Maybe that is the case. Who really knows? But thank you once again for the support, and we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to Gary Robbins, who puts in a 10 and says, "You are essential go-to for Ukraine, and great job."
And thank you so much, Gary, for the kind words. We try and be a go-to to Ukraine, and interestingly enough, we were the biggest go-to for, I think, everyone on the internet yesterday, because this channel blew up just yesterday. We got 600,000 views in a single day, and that was the largest amount of views this channel has ever gotten on a given day. It's honestly unbelievable. We also ended up getting 6.3 thousand subscribers yesterday as well, which is the largest amount of subscribers we've ever gotten on a single day in this channel as well. And we have been greatly honored since yesterday to know that so many people came here to get the news first. We were the first people to break it in the world, from what we could tell, at least in video, on YouTube, and also on the mainstream news for that matter. We were the first one to cover it. And I'm highly honored to know that so many people are now considering us a go-to on this news, because it was insane to see that yesterday. If y'all could see the viewership graph, it's every single day, even the highest days we had. And the highest day we had before this in channel history was on the 9th of June, and that was at 237,000 views in a single day. It was absolutely unbelievable to see that many people come in within a single day. So it blew us away completely. But still, thank you so much for the kind words, Gary, and thank you once again for the support. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Hal Rose, who puts in a $10 super chat, and thank you very much for the support. And they said, Enforcer Matt, Putin is lying. The new Wagner Group members are not traitors. They are soldiers who got thrown into a meat grinder and never got paid. They may yet march on Moscow to get their pay.
And maybe they will, because a lot of Russian soldiers haven't been paid, and that's why a lot of people joined the Wagner, most likely, is because they were hoping that Prigozhin would ensure that they would be paid. So maybe this will start a soldiers' revolt in the MOD for pay, perhaps. Maybe it'll be a front-wide deal. And so with that, thank you so much once again. That's a very good idea, actually. I think that's a very valid idea, a very good one. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And also, I saw Fly NY say, "Are you still doing the fundraiser on Sunday, which is tomorrow?" And of course, we definitely are. And if you're new to the channel, by the way, we run fundraisers every single Sunday on our stream to raise money for charity to help Ukraine. So be sure to join us for that. And I'm sure the Enforcer will follow up and tell you a little bit more.
Yes, to all of our new viewers, because there are still 6.4 thousand of y'all here with us tonight, which lets us know that there are still a lot of new people here watching the stream tonight with us as well. In case if y'all don't know about it, maybe y'all do know about it, this channel runs Sunday fundraisers every single week. Every single Sunday we run one, and we support Ukraine. And one second, I'm sorry, I saw something in the live chat there that I was looking at and it distracted me, but every single Sunday, ever since we've gotten the ability on this channel to run a fundraiser through YouTube Give, we have run a fundraiser. So far, this channel has been able to raise a good bit over $1 million for nonprofits that have been helping out in Ukraine. Some of those include some of the biggest names out there as far as nonprofits go, like Doctors Without Borders, UNICEF. Let's see, what else? We've done the World Central Kitchen. We've done the International Fund for Animal Welfare. We've done Razom for Ukraine, which is a Ukrainian nonprofit. We've done Revive Soldiers of Ukraine. I mean, we've done countless nonprofits.
And we've raised over $1 million for him to date as well. So a huge achievement. We achieved that about, what was it, a week or 2 weeks ago?
I think about 3 weeks ago at this point.
That's right, 3 weeks ago.
Yeah, I think this will be the third fundraiser ever since we've reached that. And every single weekend, we try and aim to raise as much as possible to help out the nonprofits that are over there. And also, to explain this as well, because a lot of people know on YouTube, and this is the thing that a lot of people are concerned about, and we always try and take care of this concern. A lot of people are concerned, where does the money go? Because a lot of people on YouTube, they set up a fundraiser and it's run by them, and they go, hey, my name's Jimmy, give it to me and I'll give it to someone. And then you give it to them, and then you don't really know where it goes. We run all of our nonprofits through YouTube itself, through a system called YouTube Give. So YouTube does all of the accounting, all of the managing of the fundraisers. And so when you send in $10, it goes into a account that YouTube has created for that fundraiser that we opened, and then they manage all of those funds. And once they get done managing them, they send all of that to that nonprofit. So if we raise $10,736, $10,736 will be going directly to that nonprofit. YouTube covers all of the transaction fees, they manage all of the funds, and that's the only way. And I have to make this very clear because many people try and come up and ask us if we'll support Jimmy's fundraiser or Laramie's fundraiser or whatever. We only run our fundraisers through YouTube Give. We never want people to have the chance to question where the funds go, because I believe that transparency is a very important ordeal, and that's also why we publicly state the amount fundraised. That's also why we do it through YouTube Give, because every time you click on a Sunday stream, as long as that fundraiser is still open, you can see the exact amount that was raised in that fundraiser, and YouTube, of course, gives the assurance along with it, right down in a window below the stream, that all the funds are being accounted for by YouTube. They cover 100% of the transaction fees, and all of the support raised in that fundraiser will be going directly to that nonprofit. And there's been some ideas and suggestions out there to address this real quick, because a lot of people have been asking us to do different fundraisers. And there have been ideas and suggestions out there to do other fundraisers. Some of them are really well known and very popular on YouTube. It's just that I have apprehension of doing them because we would have to figure out how to do it outside of YouTube Give. And once again, that throws the question up to everyone of how in the world is the money being managed and where does it go. And on top of that, there's a lot of accounting that actually has to be involved. If you're properly running a fundraiser, you have to account for all of it exactly. Like if like 1,000 people send in $5, you have to account those 1,000 $5 donations, and that would take us truly forever in the background to be able to do, and we would never be able to get back to running the stream. So for that reason as well, from an administrative and legal standpoint of running fundraisers, we also do them through YouTube Give, because it makes the administrative side of things non-existent for us. YouTube does all of that. But with that, I hope that does address how our fundraisers run fairly well, and I hope a lot of y'all join us tomorrow for one of those. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next super chat goes to JD Mako23, who puts in a $10 donation and says, fellas, could the plan be to intentionally get Prighozin into Belarus to overthrow Lukashenko and get Belarus into the war?
I would say no. I would say, in my opinion, I would say not so. Excuse me, I don't know why I'm choking on spit.
He's like me tonight.
Yeah, I'm kind of tearing to you about but Prighozin has been completely separated from the Wagner as far as a power source. The Wagner is being dismantled as we speak right now, and Prighozin is completely alone in being sent to Belarus. There's nothing following him there, and he has nothing left. So I have a feeling he's not being sent there to take over Belarus, because also why in the world will Lukashenko broker a deal where he ends up being overthrown in his own country? I have a feeling that probably won't happen. I have a feeling that he'll just go there, and he'll kind of fade into obscurity. And so with that, thank you so much once again. I hope I answered that fairly well, at least in my opinion. I know that a lot of people enjoyed when I didn't do that last night, but sometimes I feel like I have to say that, and that's one of them. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one is a $10 super chat from Cybersecurity Declassified, who does not leave a comment. But thank you very much for supporting the work, as always, and for being a long-time channel viewer and enforcer. What say you?
And thank you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. You didn't throw in a comment, but the support does help us to keep this thing rolling. And I got to thank you so much once again for the support, because it does mean a lot to us. And I thank you for helping to support our work. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Russell Spear, who puts in a $10 donation, and thank you so much, Russell, for the support. He says Prigozhin saw the Lukashenko deal as an unexpected gift. Nothing's stopping him from ousting Lukashenko and taking Belarus with their new nuclear arsenal.
Well, there is something stopping him, the lack of anyone to back him up now, because now that the Wagner is going to be dispersed amongst the rest of the Russian army, the Wagner as a power ceases to exist, and Prigozhin is entirely alone inside of Belarus. So I have a feeling that's probably how it's going to be. And also, Lukashenko does have 70,000 guys that are under his command in his military, and I have a feeling that while Prigozhin had a lot of success in Russia, I have a feeling that success would not be met in Belarus, considering that he would be a Russian, an outsider coming into Belarus filled with Belarusian people, not Russian people. And so with that, I hope that addresses that in my opinion as to what would happen, and thank you once again for the support. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And our next one goes to EMJR Militia, who puts in a 10 and says, do you think there will be unrest in other regions like Dagestan?
I have a feeling, yes, there will be. We already saw unrest there when the partial mobilization was called, and now seeing what happened north of them, I have no doubt about it, there probably will be more unrest down there in the Caucasus Mountain region. And I hope I'm saying that right when I say that every time. But with that, thank you once again. I hope that addressed that well, and we're on to the next one.
And we have a 5 from Mamba Mentality, who says, this is why I was a skeptic. What has come for, what has come from this? No civil war, no bloodshed, Wagner 50,000 recruitment, now send to Ukraine, planned out.
And I thank you for the support, Mamba Mentality. I'd have to disagree, though, because I don't think anyone ever plans out anything like this. This kind of stuff is something no one goes, yes, this would be a brilliant idea to make the public inside of our country think that our government is weak. I don't think anyone really thinks that. And I see one person in the live chat, and he's been here all night saying stuff like this, saying that it was fake, it's not real. People are dead right now. Who knows how many of them are dead? From firefights, from aircraft being shot down, from the Wagner being attacked by the Russian army. There are people dead all over the place right now along that M4 highway. And there are bridges that were nearly blown up. There were bridges that were messed with. There were roads that were dug up to stop these people from getting to Moscow. All of this is too much to say that it was fake. I know in the modern world it sounds very intelligent to always just say that everything is fake. Whenever anything happens, everyone goes, oh, it was a green screen or it's a false flag or something. But everything can't be a false flag. I'm very much under the principle of what you're seeing is what's happening. There is no shadow government behind the scenes, regardless of whatever side you're on. I think everyone nowadays on the far end of both sides thinks there's some shadow government back there. There's no shadow government back there.
Shadow Wizard Money Gang.
Shadow Wizard Money Gang. We love casting spells.
I had to do it.
This song was brought to you by the Shadow Government.
But anyways, there is no shadow government in the background that's living in an alternate reality from everyone else doing crap back there. Do you know how does anyone know how complicated that crap would be to keep secret? You know how well your friends keep secrets? Imagine those friends, thousands of them, having to be in on all together on one secret and never letting that out. Imagine that. That wouldn't happen. It won't happen. The stuff, there's very few things that are secret in this world, and they're fairly service level, usually having to deal with some kind of proprietary technology or some kind of proprietary secrets or something similar to that. You just won't find something this complex where all the Wagner soldiers know, hey guys, we're about to conduct a giant lights and camera action show for everyone around the world. Shh, don't tell anyone it's fake. And then Prigozhin doesn't tell anyone it's fake, and then no one in the Russian government tells anyone it's fake. And then the Russian government treats it like it's real, and then they know it's fake. There's just too many people involved in that process there that know it's fake, but have to treat it like it's real. And then if that's the case, why were so many people getting killed? Why were so many aircraft legitimately shot down and the pilots killed with those aircraft? Why were so many Wagner guys killed on the highway going up there? Why were there firefights? If all of this was fake, that stuff wouldn't have happened. It would have just been a quick little thing. They would have driven up that highway, nothing would have happened, nothing would have touched them. And if it was fake, why in the world would the Russians go through the effort of blowing up the oil refineries in Voronezh, the oil depots, so that way the Wagner couldn't use the fuel? If it was fake, they would have never even cared about that. They would have been like, we'll get that back in a few hours. But they did care about it because it was an actual serious concern. These people were pushing to the capital. And if we start saying that's fake, we have to start saying everything else is fake. We have to say that the 1993 coup in Russia was fake. We have to say the Soviet Union never collapsed. That whole coup that brought down the Soviet Union, that was fake too. They just came up with that so that way people wouldn't think the Soviet Union would exist, but it really does. And then, how in the world do you counter that when there's a war going on in between Ukraine and Russia, which were both parts of the Soviet Union? We have to start throwing everything into question here, and what you see is what you get in life. It really is. I don't, and I've got to be honest. It's nothing against anyone who says the thing's fake, but I don't know why so many people in the modern world act like it's just so cool to say that everything is fake. It just doesn't make any sense to me. People practically live in a alternate reality at this point, completely separate from what's actually happening, because everything in their minds is some kind of a lights and camera action show made to propagate a story to the public that doesn't even matter. Like with people saying they want to move Prighozin. It's as easy as just putting him in a plane and flying him to Belarus if they want to get him to Belarus. They don't have to go and try and conduct a coup to then come up with an excuse for him to go to Belarus. There's no reason for it. So in my honest opinion, I don't think anything about this was fake at all. People died in this thing. And valuable aircraft and equipment was destroyed. So I would have to say, I think the entire thing was real from top to bottom. And so thank you so much once again for the support, Mamba. And I hope you understand where I'm coming from, but I'm always a very big person into seeing what's going on and just figuring that out and what it actually is. Because there's not a lot that's fake. There's very few things in the world that's fake and just done for show, and usually it's very limited in scale. And so with that, and also someone said assuming people died. We saw people die on film. I don't know if you've been here the whole night for us to cover this news. We've seen aircraft getting shot down and no one ejecting out of them. That is people getting killed right there. And if that doesn't prove that, I don't know what does. But with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next super chat is a $5 donation from Mr. G. Brooks, who says, "What's it all mean for Ukraine war, and could you lay it out for a newbie?"
And can you reread that one again?
What does this all mean for the Ukraine war, and could you lay it out for a newbie?
So
I assume he's talking about the coup attempt.
And so what this meant for the Ukraine war? Honestly, really nothing. It could have meant anything. So really, I got to be honest with you, it didn't have any effect. It appears that the supply lines really weren't affected, rather than maybe for a day, which won't really be that big of a deal. And that was it. And so, honestly, the impact was probably fairly minimal. And so, thank you once again for the support.
I personally thought that maybe it would distract the Russians and they would try to withdraw some of the forces from Ukraine to go back to protect the interior of Russia. But it appears that wasn't the case, and it looks like business was as usual by the Russians in Ukraine, which is kind of intriguing. And that's the part where I think Ukraine might have jumped the gun a little bit, is by going ahead and trying to launch all of these mini offensives across the entire front line, not knowing for a fact whether or not the coup was going to last for more than a day. And I certainly didn't see the ending like this coming.
And I would agree. And so with that, we are on to the next one. But thank you once again for support. But real quick, I'd actually like to address some stuff I'm seeing in the live chat. I saw some people saying some interesting things about things that were fake. Someone said that the declaration that Iraq had weapons of mass destruction was fake. Y'all would be right. Actually, y'all would be right on that one. That one was a lie. But you got to remember, that wasn't complicated to do. Because here's the level of complexity that the Wagner coup would be if we applied it to Iraq. We claim that there's weapons of mass destruction in Iraq, and so we invade them. But the real reason to invade them is because there's something called the Washmakbabab that is on the Euphrates River that is filled with a certain kind of gold. And the special kind of gold must be handled by people that don't know it's a special kind of gold to then transport it out of Iraq and back into America, because we couldn't just go in there and buy it. Because the guys who own it right now, they actually don't know it's the special kind of Wachmabag gold that nobody can touch unless you know it specifically, but we know about it. So we, instead of just buying it from them and having it shipped over here by unknowing people, we go and start this whole war on a claim of weapons of mass destruction. And y'all can see how complicated that sounds. And whenever I hear people saying that this whole thing was faked, that's how complicated this sounds. I mean, I would get the idea that if people said the claims that Prighozin made to start this coup were baseless, Now, I could get that because they're just simple statements to be made, and people can believe in them or not. But considering that you have to go through the entire operation of pushing through the country, and everyone involved has to know that that is fake, you can't do that. That would be like telling the U.S. Army before they went into Iraq, hey, y'all, I just want y'all to know, the weapons of mass destruction thing, it's all a lie. We're just going in there and invading them for the oil. We just want y'all to know that before you go in. But y'all all have to believe now, although y'all know it's not true, y'all have to believe we're going in there to clear out weapons of mass destruction. And on top of that, the reason why y'all know it's a lie is because it came out later it was a lie in congressional hearings. They had multiple hearings, and then they figured out that the guy who said they had yellow cake uranium sat in a hotel in Baghdad for 7 days, did nothing but just have a vacation, and then he called up the government and said, yep, they got yellow cake uranium. And the lie was that simple. That's why people know about it. It's not like this one, though. There was just too many moving parts for that to be a lie. And, you know, and I don't know. People will believe it or not. I don't know. It's just really hard for me, though, to always listen to people say that there is more than what it seems with simple crap. Like, you know, for example, like the submarine blowing up on top of the Titanic. You know, everyone's saying that the billionaires faked their death and they hopped in another submarine and they sailed away somewhere. It's like, these people just died. You know, it's like there was nothing to that. They're dead. So, you know, that's just it. You know, there was no special complex plan. People just die in this world sometimes. And that's what it is. I don't know. I just don't really know what's up with folks who always believe that everything's fake or everything's always done for another reason. But anyways, with that, we are on to the next one.
All right. And our next one goes to Bomber Harris, who puts in a 20 and says the basic rules to the coup playbook is to take control of news networks first. Whoever controls the media controls the population. And Prighozin, and they spelled it Pig Ocean, could just uploaded a looping chat GPT video file of Putin in a scandalous act.
And thank you for the support. Fairly interesting idea. And I mean, I'm going to have to be honest with you, Matthew. You're going to have to reread that one to me again, because the whole thing about the scandalous act at the end kind of threw me off.
Yeah, they said the basic rules to the coup playbook is to take control of news networks first. Whoever controls the media controls the population, and Prighozin could just have uploaded a looping chat GPT video file of Putin in a scandalous act.
Possibly, he could have done something like that, but you also have to remember it's very hard to take control of media centers in a country like Russia when those are controlled by the central government. That would actually probably be one of the hardest things to take over, and they would probably only be able to take that over after they dismantled the central government. But that is true. Usually it would be best to get control of media centers before a coup began, so that way it was being presented in a positive light. But in a country like Russia, that would be a very hard thing to attain without destroying the entire government outright. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well, at least in my opinion. And thank you so much once again. And we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one is from none other than Jay Bagwell, who puts in a $20 donation. And it's good to see you once again, Jay, and thank you very much for that support. He says Prigozhin's stash was found by the Russians, 4 billion rubles in cash, allegedly seized in a car at Wagner HQ. If true, it could explain a lot. Great job covering a challenging topic. Y'all make it look easy. Walk with your boys.
We make it look easy. Walk with your boys. Damn, son, where'd you find this?
and also, by the way, I saw that they had also recovered, it looked like a ton of U.S. cash wherever Prighozhin was stashing that at. So, man, he was stashing money all over the place in multiple currencies.
Let's see, what rubles to dollars. Let's figure out what 4 billion rubles is worth. Let's see here. We'll start with a 4. So that's 4,000. That's 400,000. 4 million. Let's see. 1, 2, 3. That's 400 million. So 4 billion. So that would be equivalent in US dollars to around 48 million US dollars that he had in sacks. And I did see the pictures of that. I didn't show them on stream, but they were seized up there at the St. Petersburg office, the Wagner HQ in St. Petersburg. And it kind of does explain a good bit. It may have been that he was planning on using that some way. I don't really know what his plan was, but it kind of does explain a little bit about his planning. It shows that he was planning the coup for a little bit, for all that to be in his car. But it's really wild that he sat there and thought in his mind, son of Wagner, I'm going to take 48 million and put it in my car. You know, it's like, who in the world thinks that? I wouldn't put any money in my car. But still, thank you so much for the kind words, Jay, and also saying that we've been covering this topic. It's quite a challenging one. Especially to cover in a storyline, and sadly I got rid of the coup map up here. Let me go and grab the coup map on the second screen real quick. Google My Maps. Let me go in here, and let me grab that thing. Here we go. Here's the coup map. It was really hard covering this topic tonight because we had to deal with a special restriction, at least I had to, that I laid out, is that I had to cover it in sequence. So it wasn't just like covering it from front line to front line. It was covering as it happened hour by hour because it was that kind of an event. So it was actually a bit of a hurdle to cover because I had to make sure to try and keep on track, which goes completely against how I usually cover the news, which is where I would start down here and then I would just work my way up to Moscow. So I actually had to jump around from place to place while everything was supposed to be happening from hour to hour. So it was quite a challenge, and I gotta thank you so much for saying we made it look easy, because that was the plan, and I'm glad it succeeded, and I'm glad it did look easy instead of looking incredibly difficult like it really felt like. I actually feel drained after doing that because it was a freaking challenge in my head to try and keep the whole story going exactly the way it happened, jumping from place to place. But still, thank you so much for the support, and thank you for the kind words, Jay. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Sully Canuck, who puts in a $7 donation. And thank you very much for that support. They said, great job as usual, guys. And by the way, it's pronounced Canuck, like duck. So Canuck, not Canuck. Regards once again from London, Ontario.
Hey, thank you so much for the support. All the way from London, Ontario. Let's take a look at that place. London and Ontario. There it is. London.
Hey, it's London. In the wrong place.
Look, they even got East London, West London, Argyle, White Oaks, Masonville, the Huron Heights. They even got Hyde Park. Look, it's Hyde Park.
Way.
No way. No way. I got a cap.
Wow.
Wow. But anyways, let's go on to Central London. Let's take a look. Oh, dang. Dude, this looks like Grenfell Tower. That looks like that tower that caught on fire in London, like, for real, in 2018.
Yeah, those that one next to it looks just like it. It's like Twin Tower. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Anyways.
Never mind about that.
Anyway, so just be moving on down the road. Oh, it's summertime now. Delta Hotels. Interesting. I never heard of that brand. And there's the Y. Look, there's a Y. YMCA.
Oh, the YMCA at London, or of London.
Hey, look at that. And I like this place. It's nice. It's nice. It's not that bad. Nice. I like it. And I gotta thank you so much once again, Sully Canuck, for being all the way from London in Ontario. And also, to address the other part, we will make sure to call you correctly from here forward, Sully Canuck. I didn't know it was Canuck. I always thought it was Canuck. And I think I was actually the one who told Matthew it was pronounced Canuck, so he's been saying it wrong because of me. So apologies for that. But still, thank you so much once again for the kind words and saying we did a great job. It means a lot to us when people say that we've done a good job because, you know, we love to make people happy when we cover the news. I know it's a pretty touchy and serious thing that we're covering. You know, we're covering coups and we're covering wars, but I'm happy to know that people do enjoy it. And I thank you so much once again for the kind words and the support. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
All right. And our next one is a $5 super chat from something Mad Love, who says, what good is a nutsack if there are no actual nuts in it?
Man, that's like M&Ms that are nut free. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So thank you for the support. I really don't know what the purpose would be of that. So thank you for the support, and we're on to the next one.
And up next, we have a $5 super chat from Lucas Sandlin, who says, hey, Enforcer, do you think Prighozin and Putin set up a fake coup to bait out anti-Putin supporters and politicians? Also, at Hero Dominatus, Slav Ukraine.
And Slav Ukraine. And I would say no. I would say it was not a fake coup. It was a real one because they were trying to root out dissenters in the army. They ended up killing loyal helicopter pilots and aviators of the Russian Air Force in a pretty good amount to try and weed out disloyal members. And so with that, thank you once again for the support. And we are on to the next one.
And we have a 5 from Edgy Number 1, who says, Vlad Vexler channel is a good resource to understand the mindset of what's going on. This is a crack that'll get bigger, and Putin's days numbered over time.
And I would agree. It's going to be a crack that continues to form. It's like the 1905 revolution in Russia. It's going to get worse from here. And it's only a matter of time before this government crumbles, in Russia at least. And so, thank you for the support. I certainly agree with that completely. And this is just the beginning of a domino effect that will lead to the collapse of the Russian government. And so I hope that does address that fairly well. And also, Matthew, I have to say something about this one, man, because this is like I saw you hide them, but this is the kind of mindset that I heavily caution people against. Someone who has been in the live chat who had been refuting the story of the coup got banned just a minute ago because they say, "Geez, you guys believe anything," and that means he's about to go on a cussing rant here in a minute. And so he gets banned preemptively because we've been around the block, we've seen how that goes. But I've got to be honest with y'all, that kind of a mindset right there is one I just don't get. Because like really think about it. People have died. They've lost valuable equipment, particularly helicopters, so they don't have a lot left of. They've lost about 40% of them in Ukraine, from what we understand. And they just lost another 11 to 12 of them, at least, at the minimum, over the past day inside of Russia for no reason. Why in the world would they fake that? There's no benefit to them faking anything like that. There's no benefit to faking a coup, and it just doesn't make much sense. I don't really get it, and I'm having a really hard time even trying to piece together how I do not get that. And I just don't get this modern concept, and it's happened recently, because I remember when I used to be a kid, people actually used to try and understand and learn how government structures worked and why things happened, and they would actually work on a realistic idea. But nowadays, people just work on, if the real world way wouldn't work out for whatever I want to happen, I'll just come up with a fake fantasy world that lives in the background of the real one where this stuff can happen. I just don't get it. I don't understand it at all, because people do that with everything now. Like, the guys who died in the submersible. I'll tell y'all this. Some of y'all may have not seen pictures of the submersible. I've actually ended up seeing pictures of that thing. They're dead. They're all dead. Like you can actually see them down there with the remains of the sub. They got turned into, well, I'm not going to say that because that's a little too graphic, but they're dead. And then people are out there saying it's all fake. They faked their death, or, they knew too much. If they did, why in the hell would the CEO pilot the sub himself to get himself killed with all the people who knew too much? That just doesn't make any sense. And it doesn't make any sense when you apply that same logic to this coup. Things happen in life. Things aren't always planned. When you die one day, and to every viewer here, when you die one day, are you going to be planning that out, or is that something that's just going to happen? Are you going to get in a car wreck or just die of old age? Or will that be some kind of a master plan by you to fake people out into believing something because you took out a loan or something like that? Where does that stuff end? Where does reality actually begin? Because people always want to live in fantasy world at this point, where if they don't like something, it's just all fake. Or if they can't believe something, it's just all fake. Like, hell, I think there's still people to this day right now, Matthew, nearly 500 days into the war, that say the whole war in Ukraine is fake. There's nothing really going on over there. No one's dying anywhere. It's all fake.
I just don't understand it. And sadly, like we always say, we don't address politics, but I think that's probably the root cause of people believing things like that, is getting deeply ingrained into a political position, and then they ignore reality.
And also, I have to say this real quick. Matthew's saying that for both sides, really, because both sides do it.
Yes.
Going into what we've done, we've actually gotten into bouts with a few YouTubers, and both of them are on extreme ends of the spectrum. And I got to be honest with y'all, it's crazy, because while one of them is nearly so far left wing, they're throwing up red flags like the Soviet Union, and the other one's so far right wing, he's about to go Geschlechtvergleichung. They both ended up teaming up with each other because they're so crazy that they are on the same level. They deny reality kind of the same way, and it just is unbelievable to actually watch that in reality. That's why we end up not getting into politics, because I don't want to associate with anyone who is like heavily rooted into politics or anything like that. But when these people, and this is on every side, by the way, this is an equal critique of everyone. Whenever people get incredibly ingrained into a far right or a far left ideology, they always end up going and denying everything in front of them that doesn't agree with what they like. They say whatever. So right now, people will be saying the coup's not real. It's just not real. It's fake. You know, it was some kind of elaborate plan. And then there's people right now who are still saying that nothing's going on in Ukraine. I saw not too long ago when the president of the United States visited Ukraine, they said nothing has happened in Ukraine for the whole war, and now the air sirens go off in Kyiv. Like, there aren't normal missile attacks that happen there. You know, and I don't know if it's ignorance from these people on all ends that make them just say stuff that isn't even true. I don't know what it is. I don't know what it is about people not believing anything anymore in the modern world. But it really blows me away, and I can't even fathom how people go around in the world and they just believe that stuff that is actually happening just isn't happening because they don't agree with it or they don't think it should be happening. But anyways, I digress.
And also, real quick, just to clarify something real quick, I saw Owski say that this war is all about politics, and we're not referring to like foreign politics like Russia and Ukraine. That's totally different. We're talking about American domestic politics. It seems to permeate basically every subject now. Somehow it finds its way into everything, and that's what the Enforcer's talking about with conspiracy theories.
And yes, that's largely what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about politics as far as Ukraine is concerned, and I'm not talking about normal politics, if there even is such a thing anymore. But what I'm talking about is extreme politics, where people go very far to one end or the other, and they always just end up, if they don't disagree with something or the other side is doing something, they always just end up coming up with crazy stories that don't even pertain to reality. Like, someone could die right in front of these people's eyes, and they'll sit there and go, they'll say it was fake, and they'll come up with a reason why. And also, someone said, where can I find the Ocean Gate images? I can't tell. I can't say. I ended up finding them from a place where someone sent them to me, and I don't really think they'd like to tell. They would like me to say where they got them from. So I sadly can't tell you, but they are out there, and it was on the ocean floor, like they said. Matthew can also say that he saw them because I did show it to him. So Matthew, can you give some? Yeah. So it is on the ocean floor. And to explain what the picture looked like, you can see that the two solid ends of the submarine appears to have just literally popped out and kind of just fallen to the seafloor on the sides. And then the inside cab, which was cylindrical, pretty much flattened onto itself in two pieces like a sandwich and ended up just floating to the ocean floor kind of in that shape. Oh, but broken up in a couple of places. And there was some major I think there was one major fracture towards the rear left side of the submersible's carbon fiber interior hull. But there are pictures of it out there, and it actually did happen. And also someone said, I think the pictures are fake. Nope. That's nah. But anyways,
by the way, did you hear the story, you know, the Pakistani father and the son that was on the sub when it imploded?
No, I didn't.
Yeah, there was a Pakistani father and son on there. They'd gone down and, unfortunately they got, killed when it imploded. But there was a American dad and also son that was supposed to be taking those seats that the Pakistani father and son had eventually actually taken. But at the last second, they decided to do a little bit of research, and they found out that they thought the sub was unsafe. So they decided to give up their tickets. They spoke to the guy who ran the company, the one that also got killed in the sub. And basically, the owner of the company berated the American dad and son for saying or claiming it was unsafe, told them they were idiots for it, and then replaced them with the Pakistani father and son, and that's what eventually happened. So they dodged a massive bullet. I heard that story today, and I was like, that was a pure miracle.
That's a real story?
No, it's real. It's real. It was just, they basically substituted two different people, the father and the son, for two other ones, and they unfortunately got killed.
Dang. They did dodge a bullet. I mean, at least they did their research. They saved their lives by doing that research.
Yeah, that was a close call for them.
Yeah, I've never heard a story like that before. They were lucky. And so with that, we are on to the next one after hearing that bombshell. I didn't even know about that.
And on that bombshell. But anyways, moving on to our next super chat, we have a $7 donation from Stefan Normandan, who says, too bad Putin tried to escape in a 5-person submarine deep in the Atlantic.
Oh, speaking of that, it's like we just got done talking about that. Yeah, too bad he didn't. Because that would have ended everything for Russia, well, at least for Putin, right then and there. And so with that, thank you for the support. I don't really know where to go with it. That was so weird. That was like one of those deja vu things. We were just talking about it, and then there's a super chat about it. But thank you once again, and we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Herney IDK, who puts in a 5 and says, it really does not make sense why he just stopped. Definitely something fishy going on here.
I would have to say, as far as the coup being fake, not fishy that way to me because it was a real deal. But as far as him ending it like that, there is something weird going on there. But I don't know what it would be. I just don't know what in the world could stop someone from destroying a government that they have on their knees. I just don't know what in the world would get into someone to do that. Because if I had gone this far as Prighozin, and the convoy was only 2 hours away from Moscow and going up against AGSs and sandbags, I would have said, go for it and rip the government apart. That's what I would have said. But then this guy sits there and goes, you know what? Turn them around, you know? People have died, sure, you know, lots of Russian aviators have died, some Russian ground forces have died, some of my guys have been killed, but you know what? Let's just give up now. Like, I've never seen anyone do that. That was the craziest thing I've ever seen, and there is something a little weird about that. And so, thank you for the support. I hope that does address that fairly well, and we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to Angel B, who puts in a 5 and says, is it only Prigozhin going to Belarus, or all of Wagner? And if Wagner gets moved to Belarus, who now has nukes, and then invade Ukraine from the north?
I thank you for the support. I would say that's most likely not going to happen because right now the Wagner is being absorbed into the MOD and being distributed throughout the entire military, so that way it ceases to exist, and Prigozhin is on his way alone to Belarus. And so I would say chances of that happening are slim to none because Prigozhin and Wagner have been separated now, and the Wagner will cease to exist probably here within the next few weeks. And so with that, thank you once again for the support, and we are on to the next one.
And we have a 5 from Blue Flam 777 LSA, who says, is Nutsack gonna be a governor of an oblast, or is he wedging his bet for Putler's death?
I think he's wedging his bet for Putler's death, or he's going to just live to old age and die, being completely insignificant in Belarus, or he's going to get poisoned in a couple of months and die. I think it's going to be one of those, in my honest opinion. But thank you so much once again, Blue Flam, for the support, and thank you for being a big member of the Sleep Spring Army and having been around forever, an old guard truly. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next super chat is from Drew, who says, also, by the way, they put in a $5 donation. I almost forgot that. Thank you very much for the support. And Drew said, any shot threats were made with nukes. Any chance they captured some nukes and brokered a stand down, getting surrounded on the rear by Chechens, ?
There was a supposed story that they were going to be catching nukes. Well, not catching nukes, capturing nukes. Catching nukes. Catch these hands. But there was a supposed story they were supposedly going to be capturing nukes. I've got to be honest with you, any guess at that point of what made that coup end would be a good guess. Who knows? Because I have absolutely no idea. And so with that, thank you for the support. I hope that does address that fairly well. And we are on to the next one.
And our next one is another super chat from Blue Flam 777 LSA, who says, how to remove boogers from the nose? Question to the chat.
Okay. Well, thank you for the support. And I guess we'll be sending that over to the chat.
All right. And the live chat question is from Travis, who says, Enforcer, are the nukes that were recently transported to Belarus relevant? It seems like a lot of trouble to go through, doesn't it?
It does seem like a lot of trouble to go through. Possibly. Reread that again so that way I can make sure that my possible is a correct possible.
He said, are the nukes that were recently transported to Belarus relevant?
Yes, they are relevant a little, because Lukashenko is claiming that he has control of them, and so it's most likely possible that he's actually been given ownership of these nukes, which would be in violation of nuclear non-proliferation treaties. And so with that, thank you so much once again for the support, and we are on to the next one.
And the next one is a $5 donation from Tree Climber, who says, if Putin had left, I believe he would be finished. I had no idea how weak he was.
He is a weak guy, yeah. Like, nobody gets that. And that's one thing that I just didn't get throughout most of this war, is that although Putin made a massive blunder in Ukraine, and he's made massive blunders throughout his presidency, for example, the Georgian War and the Chechen War, and while the Chechen War and the Georgian War they would win, they were still very costly, very bloody, went poorly, and took forever, especially the Chechen War, which took like 10 years for an area this small. 10 years for something that big. I would have to say I'm honestly not really a big fan of the idea of thinking that Putin is actually a cold calculating kind of like agent or something like that. Yeah, sure, he was in the KGB, but that doesn't mean you're smart. I mean, hell, there's people there's people who are advisors to the president, and a lot of y'all think they're stupid. And honestly, they kind of are sometimes. And you know, and
Alright.
I mean, not to throw any smoke or anything, but I'm not really wanting to just saying because someone had a position somewhere they are obviously intelligent or like James Bond or anything like that. I'm not into that.
No, facts.
And Putin is certainly not one of those people. This guy is a stupid thug. He's a brutal thug at that. He's ended up killing everyone who ever stood in his way, and that's the only reason why he's so cunning. Because if he was so cunning, you know, think of this, y'all. If he was so cunning, how come he couldn't just beat Navalny in a fair election? How come he had to have the guy put in prison on trumped-up charges? You know? Think about
because
that.
he's a dictator.
Yeah, and there's nothing cunning about being a dictator. It's all about brute forcing the situation. That's all it's about. There's no cunning to that. And so I don't know why people give this guy so much credit, because you can even see right now with this coup, he's not cunning. He pretty much had to bend his knee, from what we could tell, to the Wagner for them to stand down. Otherwise, the government would have been neutered right then and there. But with that, thank you so much for the support. I hope I did address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And up next, we have a $5 super chat from CK Bold, who says, take a live chat question. And at CK Bold, we will. And thank you very much for that support, as always. And the question goes to, let's see, O-Tubes, who says, did you hear about the Russian family gunned down in their car yesterday in Russia? Russia said they thought family was a Wagner group, and it turns out they weren't.
I actually did not hear about that at all, and that would be news to me, because I covered everything we could get in picture and video evidence from this entire ordeal. I didn't see anything about that, so that's news to me. And so thank you for the support and sharing that with us. And with that, also, real quick, Mandy, I saw something in the live chat here. Before we move on to the next one, someone said, that's like saying a CIA agent is not smart. Okay, let me tell you a story. Let me tell you a story. I'll tell you all a story. Sit down and gather around. There was a guy at one point, you know, and let's just remove politics. I know that's going to be very hard for everyone here, but and also I don't mean that to everyone. I'll just say that it's always hard to remove politics for some people. But let's just remove politics from the situation for a minute, and let's talk about a guy called Petraeus. Petraeus was a general in the U.S. Army. And he had a secretary, and boy, was she a looker. And for some reason, for her to give him favors and do little nice things here and there, for some reason, she just always wanted classified documents. But who knows why? I guess she just had a fun time reading them. And so every time he would have her do nice little things for him, he would have a new batch of classified documents to give her. Now, this guy was a general of the U.S. Army. As far as I understand it, if I'm correct, Matthew, he was a general in the U.S. Army, not the Air Force or anything similar.
Let's see here. He was United States Army general, and then he was the director of the CIA.
Okay, so we even got something better. He was the director of the CIA, screwing someone and giving them classified documents so that could be done. All right, now think about that. Now think about that, y'all. Let's remove the politics from that entirely. Who cares about the guy or his political standing or anything like that? How smart is that to sit there as the director or a general in the army or the director of the CIA to sit there and give away classified documents to someone in exchange for favors? To me, that makes no sense at all, and that denotes some kind of a level of stupidity or a lack of reasoning to me. That's what I would take from it. And that shows that just because you make it to high up positions like a general in the U.S. Army, which you would think would be a very sharp, on their toes guy who is looking out for stupid things and making sure to avoid them, that shows that that's not always the case, because that guy right there did probably one of the stupidest things I've heard about in the modern day. You know, and also I see some people trying to get into the politics here and start talking about other generals, and we're not talking about that. I'm not talking about politics entirely. I'm just talking about the stupidity of that, and it shows that just because you have a position like being a general, that doesn't stop you from being a stupid person, and that was just a stupid thing to do. And so, with that, I hope that addresses that further, because, you know, and I'll say this, there are amazing CIA agents out there, and that's why we were able to sometimes get information from in the Soviet Union, and even now, that we wouldn't be able to get otherwise, because there are guys out there in the CIA that are incredible at their job, and there's an equal amount of them that are useless, incompetent idiots. That's just the way the world works. You know, not trying to sugarcoat it or anything, that's just the brutal truth. There are people who are very competent and very well put together, and there are people who can't do a damn thing right. That's just how it works, and that's how it is, and that's why I don't sit there and give Putin credit for anything for being in the KGB. because who knows if he was even a good KGB officer? We hardly know anything about his career in the KGB rather than where he was stationed. He may have been incompetent as hell from all we know. And so with that, hope that does address that fairly well, to all of y'all, what I think about that kind of stuff, because I never go into a situation thinking that someone's intelligent just because of their position. I always do it on a case-by-case basis, and based off of how they act, what they say, and what they do, I then decide if they're an intelligent and cunning person or not. And I don't think Putin has ever proved that he is an intelligent or cunning person. He's just built up a nice reputation about it, but has never proven it. And so with that, hope that covers that again, and we are on to the next one.
And up next, we have a $7 super chat from Stefan Normandin once again. And thank you very much for the second support of the night. And they said, Putin regime is known to hold stuff against a lot of people. I think it's a possibility that they had stuff that might have been a weight on the back of Prighozin that may explain the sudden change of mind.
Maybe that was the case. And someone had to have something on this guy for him to quit. I don't know what it was. I don't know what it would have been. It could have been that. It could have been that. I don't know. It drives me crazy, though, because usually we have a good answer for stuff. It's usually a logical one. There's no logical answer for what this guy did. It was the most illogical thing that he could have done, given all the information that we have. There's something out there that we're missing in those negotiations that we don't know about that made him stop this whole thing. That's all I can come to. So with that, thank you for the support, and we are on to the next one.
And we have a $4 super chat from Ranked Scrub, who says, if Prighozin is sent to Belarus as a coup of the government and to be a launching point of a North assault, NATO will need to be able to counter the plan.
Oh, they would be able to counter the plan in a moment's notice. Notice how he made it almost all the way to Moscow. Let's just say that's true. Notice how he almost made it all the way to Moscow without meeting any real resistance. That's what NATO would meet inside of Belarus and Russia right now, if the war in Ukraine is still going on at that point. And they would quash these people like bugs. There wouldn't even need to be a plan. We would just tell everyone, okay, go. We just wipe them out. But with that, thank you once again for the support, and we are on to the next one.
And up next, we have a $3 super chat from Get the Bear, as well as a $2 super chat from Dupper Bob. And sadly, no comment to address on either one of them, but thank you, Bear and Dupper, for the support. And Enforcer, what say you?
And thank you to both of y'all so much for the support. Y'all have helped out this channel a great deal, and thank you so much for supporting our work and helping us to keep this thing rolling. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
And up next, we have a $2 super chat from the B93, who says, did you guys eat and sleep well today, and dinner too? And yes, we did. We got off the stream last night at, I think it was like 1:30 or 1:45 in the morning, something like that. So it was one of the later streams we've ever had, but also one of the most exciting streams we've ever had. So we did sleep in a tad. But Enforcer, what say you?
We did sleep in a tad. Yes, we did. I'll say that 100%. But we did eat lunch and dinner. We now have to eat the midnight meal after the stream, because that's like our dinner now at this point. But we did sleep in. It was a crazy night, though. It was wild. We had to stay up late for that one. I was actually, usually behind the scenes, we're usually trying to keep track of the timetable here to make sure that we don't end up running way too late and we end up getting exhausted because of that. But last night, we were both shooting each other text messages at some points going, it's a marathon, get ready, we've got to make it a marathon, the news is crazy, we got to keep this thing going. And we tried to keep it going for as long as we could. And I hope you all enjoyed that, because we were on air way longer than we normally are, even at our longest times. And so thank you so much once again for the kind words and the support. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and up next we have a $2 super chat from Joshua Matkin, who says, I think Putin compromised to Ukraine attacking.
Say that again?
I think Putin compromised to Ukraine attacking.
Do you understand?
I don't understand it. No.
Unfortunately, I don't think I understand what that one means, but I do thank you for the support and helping this channel to keep on running and supporting our work. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and we have a $2 super chat from Marc-Andre Burnett, who does not leave a comment. And thank you, Mark, as always, for that support. And Enforcer, what say you?
And thank you so much, Mark, for the support and helping this channel to keep on running and supporting our work. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And with that being said, take a shot. We are all out of super chat questions. So once again, thank you all for the support tonight and helping to keep the channel running. And we're moving on to our live chat questions. And of course, up first, we have our Morse code decoders of the stream. We have Mark Hodges, C-Fay, Cliff Simonson, Earl Bernew, and Paul Schultz. They said, tonight's Morse Code Cipher says, I got to tell you, that coup was just like a movie. It was high energy and only lasted a few hours.
And that's the sound of money, because y'all just hit the jackpot and got that Morse code message correct. And oh, buddy, I gotta tell you, real life is better than anything else the movies or fiction can make. I mean, that was just crazy to watch. You know, we're sitting there, Matthew, last night. Rostov-on-Don just turned themselves over to the Wagner and joined their side. They just drove through Voronezh. Okay, good night, everyone. It's like, they're just going everywhere. It was insane. And I got to thank y'all for deciphering that Morse code message, because y'all been doing that for 486 days now, and I got to thank y'all so much once again, because that's an incredible skill that y'all got, and everyone's always amazed whenever y'all get the Morse code message. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
And up next, we have another super chat that just came in. This one is from Marion Deemer, longtime channel legend, who puts in a $20 donation, and thank you, Marion, very much for that support. And she said, you guys rock. And thank you very much.
And thank you so much for the kind words, Marion. You've been around for a while, and I got to thank you so much for supporting this channel and supporting our work, so that way we can keep on doing this. And thank you so much for the kind words as well, because it means a lot to us that folks really do enjoy this channel. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
And moving back to our live chat questions, we have one from Edu Sakura, who says, did Wagner agree to the deal because it included the removal of the Minister of Defense of Russia?
Maybe, but we haven't seen him arrested yet. He hasn't been removed. So that was an agreement. The Russians have already violated the agreement. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. And we are on to the next one.
And we have a question from Giuseppe, who says, do you think that Prighozin going to Belarus, that he could plan to attack Ukraine from the north?
Nah. The Wagner's being torn apart as we speak right now. He's got nothing left behind him. So unless he's attacking on his own, there's no way that that's going to happen. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. And we are on to the next one.
All right, and the next one goes to, let's see here, Mr. Norton, who says, do you really think that the Wagner forces will want to go back fighting on the front line in Ukraine?
Probably not, really, but they probably won't have a choice either, because they're being spread out and distributed amongst the entire Russian army, and I'm sure they'll be pretty easy to manage on a one-on-one basis from commander to soldier. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
And I see a question in the live chat from Ghostly, who says, do you think the West were involved in the negotiations which ended the coup?
Probably not. It probably was just Belarus's middleman in between the rebel forces and the Russian government, like was explained to us, because it appears that the United States hasn't come out and made a statement, and usually whenever anyone's brokering a peace, everyone always loves to come out and say that they're the third party brokering it, because it's a prestige thing. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
And we have a question from a W13RD guy, who says, do you reckon that Prighozin found a better deal just holding out until more can join his revolution from remote territories?
Wait, reread that one again, because I think I may have misunderstood that.
Do you reckon that Prighozin found a better deal just holding out until more can join his revolution from remote territories?
I'm not really sure if I'm understanding that the way it's supposed to be, but I don't think the deal he took right now is allowing for that, because the Wagner is going home. To answer that another way, because I'm not really sure if that's the right way to understand that, I would say that would have been a pretty good idea. Honestly, he didn't even have to wait, though. He didn't have to wait for extra people to join. He could have attacked with what he had, and it would have been successful. So I don't know why he gave up, but he got a bad deal would be my first answer in the way I understood that question. And the second answer would be he didn't even have to wait at all for anyone to join. He could have just done it with what he had. And so with that, we're on to the next one.
And our next question goes to Portstan, who says, would NATO care if Putin had used a tactical nuke to stop Prighozin in Russian territory?
I have a feeling he probably wouldn't have used a tactical nuke in Russia, because I'm sure that would have turned the public, a large amount of the public would probably be neutral or indifferent to the matter. If they heard that the Russian government nuked the Wagner and ended up killing innocent citizens as well, that probably would turn everyone in the nation, including most of everyone, maybe even the inner circle, against Putin, and he would be all alone. So with that, I hope that addresses that, in my opinion, and we are on to the next one.
And we have another super chat. This time is from Scott Jensen, who puts in a 10 and does not leave a comment. But thank you, Scott, very much for that support. And Enforcer, what are you going to say?
What am I going to say?
I totally lost my line there for a minute.
I was about to be like, that's not the line. It's what say you. I was about to be like, what the
It sounded like
hell?
fighting words almost. What you gonna say?
What you gonna say? You talking to me? You talking to me? Oh, come on, man. But thank you so much, Scott, for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. You didn't put in a comment, though that support does help us to keep on doing our work here on this channel and help us to keep on covering the news. And I gotta thank you so much for that, because without folks like you, it wouldn't be possible. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
And we have another super chat that just popped up. This one's from Lewis, who puts in the 10 and says, "Last night was insane. The LSA just grew a bit more, and Slava Ukraine and unleashed the penguins."
And Slava Ukraini. And thank you so much for the support, Lewis. And it's crazy. The LSA did grow a whole lot more last night. It was unbelievable. It was actually the largest subscriber day in history. There were 6,300 new people that joined the Lee Spring Army last night. And that is really wild because, you know, if y'all are interested, and 1 second, let me change things around over here. Let me go read it. If y'all are interested, the biggest day ever, subscriber-wise, rather than yesterday, was May 8th of 2022, where we got 5,844 subscribers because we got a shout-out on Operator Starsky's channel. That was actually the first time he was coming over here to be a guest, was all the way back then on May 8th of that year. And that was the biggest subscriber day we ever had up till this point. And it's crazy how many people came to this channel last night and how many people watched it and how many people subscribed to it. It was unbelievable to us, really. We were completely blown away. And at this point on the stream last night, I think we're at like 160,000 views. Tonight we're at 50,000. It wasn't as big of a stream because, you know, the civil war starting in Russia was pretty insane. Hearing it end so quickly, you know, it's kind of a bit of a downer to some folks. But it was absolutely insane. We were so honored, really. We were blown away and completely flattered that so many people picked our stream to come to watch out of everything else. You know, there was a lot of people at the time we went live that were live trying to cover it as well. And out of all of those people, they chose our channel to come to. And I was just completely blown away and flattered that so many people chose to come here instead of other places. And if y'all are here tonight and y'all just started watching this channel last night, thank you so much. We're greatly honored that you're here with us right now, and we're greatly honored to find that y'all found our news coverage last night to be exceptional. And so, thank you so much once again to all of y'all so much who have joined us tonight, and thank you so much for the kind words as well, Lewis, because the Lee Spring Army didn't just grow a little bit, it grew the most it ever has in a single day. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and we have another question from the live chat here. Just making sure I didn't miss any super chats that just came in. It looks like we are all caught up. So the question from the live chat goes to Fro, who says, "Who would you rather see in power as president of Russia, that bald turd, or the poo turd currently as president, and why?"
I would say that's a tough one, you know, because we actually covered this last night. I don't really know who I'd want. You know, Putin, we know Putin. We know who Putin is. We don't know what Prighozin is, though, as a leader. We know he's volatile. But at the same time, with Prighozin, with Piggy Boy, being the one who
Pig Ocean.
Yeah, Pig Ocean. Pig Ocean. That's what we ought to call him, Pig Ocean. With Pig Ocean being the leader of the government, there's chance for us to get in there and start messing with it. I know that kind of sounds a little weird and kind of messed up a little, but hey, we could start to mold Russia into whatever we wanted at that point, so I would kind of be for Pig Ocean, really. And so with that, I hope that addresses that fairly well. We're on to the next one.
And up next, we have a question from Eric Harris, who says, "Do you think more facts about the coup will come out later?" And I personally think that we'll learn more about this coup not in years or decades. I think that U.S. officials, which have a lot more intelligence on the issue than we're aware of, are going to probably leak some details here shortly because it benefits us, because by leaking some of those details, hopefully it'll get back to some of the Russian people and they'll hear exactly how bad the situation is, which helps promote instability in the country and maybe a regime change, which could end the Ukraine war. So, Enforcer, what say you?
Could you reread the question, sir, please?
It says, do you think more facts will come out about the coup later?
More facts about the coup? Yes, I think there will. Probably in years' time, though. It won't be anytime soon. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next question goes to Epic Canadian Man, who says, "This coup has showed that inner border Russian forces can be easily pushed aside to an extent, And would this show to any rebel groups that battle for self-governance is possible?
Oh, yes, I think it does right now. I think this shows that Russia is weaker than it ever could have been. And so I think that there will be all kinds of rebellions happening in Russia probably within the next few months or years. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. And we're on to the next one.
And we have a question from Christian Casper, who says, do you really think they will let him off after they shot down numerous aircraft and eliminated all the pilots?
Nah, they're going to kill him eventually. I would give him probably several months to live in Belarus before he's poisoned or assassinated. People like him, they don't survive long going up against the Russian government like that. People have done less than that and have ended up being killed in Russia for lesser things. So I know he's not going to be surviving. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to John Harrison, who says, why do you guys think that the Ukrainians have not gone on a total offensive along the whole front? I'm thinking it's not ever going to get a better time.
They actually did, but we didn't really see them meeting as much success as I thought they were going to be last night, because last night, when the coup was going on, they said, we've started a front-wide offensive, massive gains, heavy losses for the Russians, and then today we didn't really see massive gains. I just kind of saw what I would call, y'all know I'm a big person about being positive about what's going on for the Ukrainian army, but what I saw, I would not call major gains. I would call those minor gains across the entire front. That wasn't necessarily major gains to me. That was not what I was expecting the front line to look like when it updated this morning. But with that, we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to Eugene Minton, who says Putin hasn't been replaced. He could simply be a figurehead and an acting president with no authority, and maybe the coup was successful, and we may just never know.
If the coup was successful, Prighozin wouldn't be exiled to Belarus. He would probably still be able to remain in Russia. I would say that Putin is certainly not going to be a puppet. There's no way in hell anyone like him would agree to be a puppet. He would rather fight it out in the civil war and die in that civil war than be a puppet. So I would say that may be the case. There's a slight chance of that, but I have a feeling it's probably not the case. It's probably the case that Prighozin just chickened out, really, to me. But with that, we are on to the next one.
And up next, we have a question from Hashing It Out, who says, how long will Putin keep Prighozin alive, and will other members of Wagner continue the rebellion?
He'll probably stay alive for a couple of months. No one in the Wagner will continue the rebellion, though, because they would be on their own at this point. A lot of them are disgruntled, yeah, but they're not going to, go and do this again. And there's no real central authority for them to do it around. And Prighozin will probably survive for a couple of more months. You see, the Russians can't kill him immediately because it will look too bad. They'll have to wait a little bit for this to kind of blow over, and then they'll go kill him. They'll probably try and kill him in some kind of a quiet way, too, put a pillow over his head or poison his tea or something like that. It'll be something more light. They won't go and shoot him like they do some people, so it'll be something more subdued. And it'll be after all of the public attention moves off of him. And I'm sure Belarus will help with that. They'll help to make sure that he's really isolated, no one's really talking about him, so that way when he dies, everyone kind of even really forgot he existed or even was alive around there. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to turning on your gas lights. I thought it was turning off. I think I might have mistyped that or something. Turning off your gas lights, who said, I am sure you are aware of Lukashenko's plane flying to Turkey, taking an unusual route. No transponder is on, and will you be touching on that?
We did touch on that a little bit last night. We didn't touch on it much, though. And I hope that addresses that fairly well. So that we're on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Super Action General, who says, do you think they might have captured Nutsack's family and held them as hostages until he gave up?
It's possible. We don't really know what happened behind the scenes to make Prighozin give up so quickly in a position of strength, but it had to have been something severe, and that may have been one of the things. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well, and we are on to the next one.
And once again, we have another super chat. This one is from Scott Jensen, once again, who put in a 10 earlier and puts in another 10 now and says, how is it for Russia that they now have thousands of armed insurrectionists either integrated into their army or behind their lines?
I'm telling you, that's not going to end well at all, in my opinion. Because these guys, you see, thoughts are a mental illness, a plague, really. That's a better way to describe it. thoughts are diseases, thoughts are plagues, and they spread like them. So if someone has an idea that's new and the Russian army hasn't really been talking about it, you see, because the Russian army has a couple of thoughts that are standard throughout most of it. For example, being disgruntled about lack of pay. A lot of Russian soldiers sit there and go, man, I'm pissed off the Russian army doesn't pay us. You're now going to move a Wagner guy into that unit who sits there and goes, you know, I was actually in a convoy and we were just 200 kilometers away from Moscow. We were about to overthrow the whole government to make sure that there was justice and pay in the Russian army. And then these guys hear that and they've never really thought about that before. And now that disease, that thought disease of the idea of revolting against the Russian government and mutinying for pay, that's now going to spread to everyone else in the Russian army. And of course, I'm not saying that, you know, thoughts are diseases or plagues or anything. I'm just comparing them to that because they spread like them. But that's something that is not going to end up well for the Russians at all. Because, and I don't know why they're not thinking about that. They ought to just dismiss the Wagner and send them home and make sure that they have as little contact with the Russian army as possible. Because it's not going to end well moving them back into the army and then letting them spread their ideas. That is going to end up destroying the Russian government. And that is a stupid, stupid premise to make for them because they're going to end up even speeding up their demise and turning more people against them as time goes by. But with that, we are on to the next one. I hope that did address that fairly well, and thank you once again for the support.
And the next question we have is from AF Kaplan, who says, could the end of the so-called coup put the counteroffensive of the AFU in jeopardy? And I heard that they have now fully committed their forces.
I've heard that they have fully committed their forces. I'm not really sure if it'll jeopardize them. We did hear that there was something not so great happening around Severodonetsk. I really couldn't get that much information about it. And also if they have made it to Severodonetsk, hell, they've moved pretty far. But we don't really know exactly what's happening there. So with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. We'll be waiting to see what happens in the Ukraine war tomorrow when the coup news dies down because no one's even focusing on Ukraine at the moment. Everyone's focusing on the coup. But still, with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next question is from S. Blanchard, who says, Wagner claims Russians bombed their camp. Is it possible that Ukraine bombed them from a Russian system to look like Russia did it, or other like means? And thank you.
It's possible that they could have done something to make it look like the Russians bombed the Wagner, but at the same time that would require a great in-depth understanding from the Ukrainians that the Wagner and the MOD are having some pretty high tensions rising amongst the two of them, and they may or may not have, well, actually everyone knew that, so it wouldn't have been something that was a great mystery or anything. They may have actually done that and tried to capitalize on the anger in between the two, but we also never really heard the MOD come out and plainly state they didn't do that. They didn't really make much of a mention about anything on that at all, whether they did do it or not do it. And so with that, I hope that addresses that fairly well, and we're on to the next one.
And our next question goes to BMAD, who says, after this, I see Russia reaching an agreement to give back what is currently taken, but I don't see them giving up Crimea, and what do you think?
I think that Crimea will be an entirely different ordeal than the rest of Ukraine, considering that they want that strategically important port. So I would say yes to that. They may be fine with giving up the rest of the Ukraine, the rest of Ukraine that they occupy, but Crimea will probably be another story, negotiation-wise or war-wise. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next question is actually not a question, it's a super chat from Scott Jensen once again, who puts in a 2, and thank you very much, Scott, for the third support of the night, and we really do appreciate it very much. And our next question goes to Just Me, who says, did you show the Madiar trolling video? My electric went out and didn't want to miss y'all's reaction. And also I do know where that video is at. It's on Twitter. I can't remember whose DM it's in, but it is a good video, though.
It is a good video. I didn't show it on stream, though, because we had so much to cover, but it was a good video. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
And we have a question from JC, who says, do you think that they will use Wagner for frontline fodder? And they've been doing that for a long time. They'll probably keep doing it.
Oh, they will now. They might even make specific platoons in these units of Wagner guys and say, okay, storm them, and just let them get roasted, pretty much. I think that'll probably happen. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to, let's see here, Tracy, who says, after what we saw in the last 48 hours, how does anyone tell the AFU that they can't roll into Moscow and end the war?
Probably because the Russians do have most of their forces on the front line inside of Ukraine and near the border, but they don't have it behind their lines. So it may be a lot more difficult for Ukraine to do something like that, but it wouldn't be difficult for, say, America to roll straight to St. Petersburg and take it without any resistance, most likely. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and with that being said, let's see here. It looks like I have one question left in the spreadsheet, and I don't see any more questions in the live chat to grab. So, Enforcer, I think this might be our last one.
All right. And so with that, who is the lucky last person to put in the lucky last question of the night?
And that viewer is Bards Amok, who says, if Shoigu is put on trial for the recent attacks on Wagner camps, and also Prighozin had his crimes wiped away to a clean slate, then would you agree that it was a partial success?
It may have been a partial success, perhaps. I don't think it was a success as far as Prigozhin's original goals were. He was planning on killing everyone in the government, and everyone's still alive and well there. So I don't think he achieved that, but I think he did achieve some other things, maybe possibly fracturing the Russians to the point they will never recover. But who really knows? Only time will tell what they really achieved. And so with that, I hope that does address that question, and it is the end of tonight's stream. It's been an absolute pleasure covering this news with all of y'all tonight. It's been an absolute roller coaster over the past 24 hours. And I hope that we've been able to cover this news accurately and well enough that y'all have gotten a great understanding of exactly what has happened over this coup. It is probably one of the most insane moments in history, not just the war in Ukraine, but the almost civil war that happened in Russia for a little while. And I'm greatly honored to know that so many of y'all were here to witness history with us as we were covering it. If y'all did enjoy and y'all are new to this channel, and there are nearly 5,000 of y'all still watching right now, so I'm assuming that there's probably a good amount of y'all who are new, make sure to subscribe, because that helps y'all to keep apprised of when this channel runs these streams, which is 6 days a week at 10 p.m. Eastern Time. We cover the past 24 hours of the news of the war in Ukraine, and then if anything insane like this happens again, we will also be covering that as well in entirety. And I got to thank all of y'all so much once again for watching. Also, make sure to hit the like button. We got up to 2,500 likes tonight. We could bump that up even higher if y'all would like. Y'all just have to hit the like button. That's the way to bump it on up there. And I got to thank you all so much once again for being here tonight and being a part of this channel and the Lee Spring Army. And so with that, good night, good luck, take care, stay safe. Long live, wait, I'm getting the two phrases mixed up. Slava Ukraini, and long live the Lee Spring Army.
And good night, LSA. Be sure to join us tomorrow for the fundraiser stream. And
Yes. The Lee Spring Army sends